The monster smashed its way through the trees. Its appearance was definitely bizarre. Not one good thing could be said about it. The monster was at least 4 meters tall, but oddly slim compared to its height. Its skin was chapped and gray with occasional black spots.
Because of this, Sol Ji-hoo briefly mistook the monster for a tree. But once he laid eyes on its lengthy limbs, each half the length of its entire body, and its sharp, hook-like claws, he knew this creature was definitely dangerous. Perhaps the worst feature of it all was the shape of its skull, which was much too long, as often seen in alien movies, or the 2 large holes representing its eyes.
The ears are also huge. And sharp too. It was then that their eyes met. Kurr! And at that moment, Sol Ji-hoo saw the inside of the homunculus mouth. It was full of numerous teeth that resembled those of a shark. The monster seemed elated with its discovery of the prey. Immediately, the homunculus curled up. It was preparing to jump over the cliff. When it jumps, he'd gotten plenty of practice at parrying leaping attacks since the tutorial. Sol Ji-hoo roused his mana, wary of the enemy's attack.
His machete vibrated as golden sword chi swirled around its blade, and sparks of electricity flickered beneath his feet.
All of a sudden, the homunculus raised its head from the curled-up position. Quang! Sol Ji-hoo stood rooted, wide-eyed and surprised.
The smell of blood stung his nose. He hadn't let his guard down, and yet, the monster's sharp teeth and crimson lining were gleaming right before his eyes. What an incredible speed! But what surprised Sol Ji-hoo even more, was that the homunculus flew straight at him without leaping in the air, just like a bullet. A movement like that was simply impossible without a superb elasticity.
Damn it!
Astonished, Sol Ji-hoo still managed to block the attack, thanks to Jang Maldong's shadow boxing training. He was expecting the monster's movement to be similar to that of Phi Sora, and his body moved on its own.
Slap! Without caving in, he used flash thunder to avoid the monster's attack. At the same time, he leapt forward, swinging his machete with all his might, keeping in mind the colored stone training. Swish! He felt the hit.
The strange sensation of chopping frozen meat spread in his grasp.
His machete had pierced the skull of the homunculus and escaped through the back of its head.
Did I do it?
Suddenly, a sense of impending doom swept through Sol Ji-hoo. It was not over yet. Sol Ji-hoo quickly lowered his left arm to his ribs, and, almost simultaneously, the monster swung its arm to slap him in the chest. Thwack! Oh!
As he felt his elbow bone shatter, Sol Ji-hoo's eyes reflected the blue sky. When he came to his senses, his body was already in midair. Only after he crashed into a rock did the forced flight stop.
Cough, cough.
After being thrown to the ground, Sol Ji-hoo coughed repeatedly as his face slowly warped to a frown.
A painful, burning sensation engulfed his left arm.
He tried to endure the pain and attempted to raise himself using his machete as a cane, but the machete snapped in half, and he stumbled. Perhaps the mana of sword chi was too exhausting on the blade, or it might have been the homunculus attack. There was no way of knowing for sure the exact cause of the break.
In any case, he had just lost his only weapon.
Worse still, this was their first clash.
Shit! Sol Ji-hoo cursed under his breath and got up. He grabbed his left arm, now limp from the attack, then squinted his eyes to focus. The homunculus was reeling in place, half of its head missing. Though it stumbled, it quickly regained its balance. Soon, strange bubbles formed at the cross-section of its wound and new flesh began to rise. Having witnessed the monster's head regenerate, Sol Ji-hoo grimaced. The homunculus had just recovered from a mortal wound. This had to be the result of its sword regenerative abilities. As soon as he saw the homunculus looking his way, Sol Ji-hoo felt somewhat dejected. The monster wasn't impossible to defeat, but it wasn't an easy opponent either. In terms of raw power, the homunculus was superior. In terms of speed, they were equivalent, but only if he relied on flash thunder.
The problem was that the longer the battle dragged on, the worse it would start to get for him.
He had neither a weapon nor an artifact. He could only rely on his mana and his body. And the latter wasn't perfect, as one of his arms had already been rendered useless. 4 left. Sol Jihu spat out saliva mixed with blood. A wave of electric currents began to encompass him. Soon, the golden chi and the monster clashed again. Asterisk.
Meanwhile, as Sol Jihu confronted the homunculus, Un Yuri took Park Wori and Yu Yolmu to the gacha machine.
According to the map, there were a total of 4 gacha machines on this island.
These machines were placed far apart from each other, and the trio had traveled to the nearest one to check the list of prizes.
List of prizes. 1. 1 to 9 coins. Ramen, daily necessities, guide's note, medical supplies. 2. 10 to 49 coins. Relief goods, souvenir, map, maid's letter. 3. 50 to 99 coins. Survival points, cell phone, latest model. 4. 100 to 299 coins. Potion, weapon, equipment, survival kit, combat ration, coin lottery. 1 to 499 coins, spell ball. 5. 300 coins, special.
6.
666 coins, offering, guaranteed.
Sol Jihu hoped to try the standard way.
In the second stage, that would be to use the gacha machine.
However, Un Yuri soon ran into a problem.
There wasn't enough time. Maybe it wouldn't be so hard if they were inside a closed space, like a school.
But on an island this size, just walking around took a significant amount of energy, and the hints about the whereabouts of coins were obscure.
For example, even if one knew that a coin was buried under a rock in a certain direction, there would simply be too many rocks in the said direction. Even with the help of the diary of an unknown survivor, it would take Un Yuri an entire day to check all the rocks. She didn't have that kind of time right now.
She had to collect as many coins as possible, use them to win a useful prize from the gacha machine, and deliver the prize to Sol Jihu, all just in a couple of hours.
How, though? Un Yuri glanced back. Park Wori and Yu Yolmu were following her silently, but they both looked like they had a lot of questions. I can't trust them. She knew she couldn't tell them the whole truth.
Though they did remain until the end back at the gathering place, they could still change their minds once they learned that Un Yuri didn't have as much strength as Sol Jihu. That being said, they were the only 2 allies she had at this point in time. Un Yuri was never the type to trust others easily. However, the situation called for a compromise.
To get her plan going, she first had to convince the duo to help. Quote. All of a sudden, Un Yuri stopped walking. She locked her fingers together and stretched, showing off her slender figure. Then she sat down on a nearby rock. Let's rest up here. We should eat. I'm hungry. When she took out food from her backpack, the 2 men opened their eyes wide. Aren't you gonna sit? Well. When Un Yuri asked casually, Yu Yolmu stuttered.
But, is this really okay? What do you mean?
Un Yuri asked. Yu Yolmu trailed off, his gaze traveling sideways. Then he narrowed his eyes, tightened his lips, and looked at Un Yuri again, his expression stiff. Ah! You mean him? With a piece of bread in her mouth, Un Yuri answered casually. Don't worry about him. He's off playing with that monster, the homunculus.
Huh? Playing?
Park Wori exclaimed in surprise before his face lit up. Aha! I knew he had a plan.
Am I right?
Well, yes, he could certainly take the monster out if he wanted to. How? Un Yuri pretended to hesitate. After a while, she said cautiously, as if revealing a big secret. He's actually not an invited. What? He's the one who invited me here, to be precise. You could say he's a special kind of guide who can interfere with a tutorial.
Wait, so, You're saying that he has already entered the other world?
Yes. A contracted doesn't have these kinds of privileges.
It's a bonus privilege given only to an invited with the highest grade, the gold mark.
When Eun Yuri opened her status window and showed them her grade, Park Woo-ri let out an exclamation of surprise and joy. Ah!
So, this means, wait, hold on a second. Then he tilted his head in confusion.
Mrs., then why was he like that back there? He looked pretty bummed out, all right. Eun Yuri flinched. She cleared her throat. First, I'm not his wife.
Second, I wouldn't say he was bummed out, rather, I think his pride was hurt. Quote.
When we were alone, he gave me a lot of excuses. It didn't seem like he had expected the homunculus to enter a rampaging state. Eun Yuri continued.
Though special, this still is a tutorial. And because he's a big shot in paradise, not being able to control something as petty as a tutorial is embarrassing for him. Apparently, we're being broadcasted all over paradise, so there's the matter of saving his face, too.
Park Woo-ri remembered Phi Sora yelling at the sky and opened his mouth wide, convinced of Eun Yuri's explanation. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yu Yolmu cut in. But I think you'd better call him. He lowered his voice and continued. I'm suspecting we have followers. And it's not just one or two. Eun Yuri's eyes gleamed.
What?
Where?
Park Woo-ri jumped in surprise. Don't look. He almost looked back but stopped at Eun Yuri's words.
For now, just pretend you didn't notice. Eun Yuri whispered and looked at Yu Yolmu.
Unfortunately, we can't ask him for help. Why not?
At this rate, we'll. I'm in the middle of a test. A special kind of a test. Yu Yolmu frowned in confusion. The truth is. Eun Yuri sighed.
There's a specific reason he came all the way to this tutorial at the expense of using his gold stamp on me. He wanted to activate the special tutorial and claim the special reward.
And he already achieved this goal. Then. Well, that doesn't mean I was abandoned. He just wants to see me try.
He said that if I can't overcome something as simple as this, I don't belong in paradise.
Eun Yuri licked her lips. So anyway, I'm being tested, and I have to prove my worth to him.
That's why. She took a brief pause and glanced at Park Woo-ri and Yu Yolmu.
I want you two to help me. If you do, I promise to pay you back twice as much in the neutral zone. Yu Yolmu nodded without hesitation.
Of course I'll help. But are we allowed to do that?
He never told me that I couldn't form a team.
And the rampaging homunculus is the final boss of the tutorial.
Capturing it will earn both you and me a lot of points. Park Woo-ri had been listening with much anxiety, but after hearing this latest comment, his eyes sparkled.
The test is simple.
I have to find a way to defeat the final boss.
But he told me that he'll value the process more than the outcome. The process?
I'm assuming he meant he'll measure how fast I find the coins and use the gacha machine.
The faster I am, the better score I'll get.
Yu Yolmu nodded.
How can I help?
I have a plan.
You said you're an actor?
Yes. Although, I'm not very famous. Okay. But first, let's go someplace else. Mindful of the surroundings, Eun Yuri rose from the rock. She then headed to the nearest cabin. The trio went in, and 20 minutes later, only one of them came out. Okay. I'll be right back with it. With a cry, Yu Yolmu slammed the door and began running in the opposite direction of the cabin. Busy, busy.
He muttered to himself and ran as fast as he could as if some urgent quest had befallen him.
In his hands was a piece of paper. Asterisk. Not long after, Yu Yolmu stopped.
South of the gacha machine. At the rock underneath the tree with a white cloth hanging on a branch.
Muttering, he looked around and soon discovered the said tree. He then pushed the small rock underneath the tree. Wow!
They're really here!
He exclaimed in surprise when he discovered the hidden coins. 1, 2,
3, 4.
Damn. It sure rocks to be the invited. He smirked at the sight of the coins. Let's see. Next is left from the rock with the coins. He picked up the coins from the ground and moved about 24 steps to the left.
Then, he dug the soil beneath red flowers and, again, gave an exclamation of joy.
Awesome! I found them again. Yu Yolmu straightened his back and turned around, humming to himself. Next.
He then smirked at the sight of a large boulder. Perhaps behind that boulder?
It was quiet. He couldn't feel anyone nearby, yet Yu Yolmu did not stop talking to himself.
That's odd.
I really think there'd be some behind that boulder.
Because he remembered what he saw back at where the gacha machine was.
It's not the coins I'm talking about.
But there was still no response whatsoever.
Ow! Yu Yolmu sighed loudly as if he wanted to be heard. Man, you're dense.
Just stop and come on out.
Quote. I know you people have been following us. I saw you back at the empty lot. He announced in a deep voice and finally heard a rustle. About 4 or 5 people appeared from behind the large boulder. One of them was the young man who tried to shift blame to Sol Jihu back at the empty lot. Finally.
How did you know? I told you, I saw you.
Of course, I'd notice a naked woman hiding behind a bush.
As Yu Yolmu pointed out, some people in the group were either not dressed or barely wearing a top, though the young man was an exception. They were the survivors who had been captured by the pervert killer and rescued by Sol Jihu.
Damn it. I told you this was a… Hold on.
Let me just make this clear.
I haven't told anyone yet. The young man stopped and frowned.
What? I said, I haven't told anyone.
I'm the only one who knows you've been following us. Do you understand? Yu Yolmu asked, tilting his head back just slightly.
Now, if you're not idiots, you should know the reason I haven't told them yet.
A look of suspicion crossed the young man's face.
What are you playing at?
Playing? No. I just had the same thoughts as you guys.
Suddenly, Yu Yolmu began gazing around restlessly. Soon, he fixed his eyes on something and pointed his index finger at it.
Right over there. Do you see that blue rock?
Can someone move it? What the hell are you talking about?
What blue rock? The young man stopped. There really was a faintly glowing blue rock in the direction that Yu Yolmu was pointing. Of the many rocks around, only this was a different color. Move it. Just do it, and we'll talk.
It's not exactly a hard thing to do, is it?
Still suspicious, the young man walked over to the rock and kicked it lightly. Then, his eyes went wide.
You see it?
The coins.
The young man hurriedly picked up all the coins and looked at Yu Yolmu with a dopey look on his face. How did you know? Instead of answering, Yu Yolmu threw the piece of paper in his hand to the young man.
The young man caught it just barely and frowned while reading it. This is… In cute, round handwriting, the note listed where the coins were hidden. You were right about one thing. The invited are different from the contracted.
Apparently, they're given a bunch of advantageous privileges from the start.
The young man clenched his teeth. Fuck. I knew it. This was all a scam.
He feigned a smile, then looked at Yu Yolmu with one eye opened wide. The fact that you're showing this to me, does this mean you want to join us? You're quick.
I like that. Yu Yolmu announced with a grin. Yes, I'd like to join you.
But tell me, what exactly are you planning to do? Why do you even ask?
We're gonna follow them, and…
If you think you can just take her privileges, you're wrong.
Yu Yolmu cut in without giving the young man a chance to finish.
Calm down and think for a moment.
If that was possible,
then I would have taken them a long time ago, instead of asking to join you.
Yu Yolmu was right, and the young man fell silent. Unfortunately, the privileges can't be stolen. They appear in the form of a message, apparently.
Message? Yeah. Like the status window.
This means that we can neither see them nor touch them.
The young man cursed under his breath at the unexpected turn of events. "What about it?"
"Can't we just capture her and ask her about these messages?"
asked one of the young man's friends. "How are you going to make her talk?"
"Well, I mean, we could threaten her, or—" She hesitated, and Yu Yolmu scoffed.
"You sure about that? Pardon?"
She seemed like a tough nut to crack. "What will you do if she refuses to speak?" The woman shut her mouth.
After chewing his lips nervously, the young man opened his mouth again. "Do you have any other plans?"
"I do." Yu Yolmu grinned.
"Come sit here."
He took out from his pocket a map of the island and spread it out on the ground.
"A map?"
It was inside my leather backpack.
"We haven't got much time, so I'm gonna cut right to the chase. You are aware of the situation, no?"
Yu Yolmu urged, and the young man settled at a spot across from him. "Let me first tell you about her plan.
The bitch wants to take down the final boss." "What?
Is that even possible?" "Of course not." Yu Yolmu smiled bitterly.
"She told me that the male invited was buying us some time with his privileges. But I don't believe that bullshit. If her plan was to gather coins as fast as possible and activate the portal, I wouldn't have betrayed her. But she's too stubborn."
"We're both looking for a lifeline, so enough with the excuses."
"Just tell me about your plan. What are you gonna do?"
"Look right here. You see all these lines and numbers drawn on the map?"
As he said, the map showed lines drawn in pen in the shape of a snail and numbers starting at 1 written at regular intervals in ascending order. "What is this?"
"The lines represent the course. The numbers are the gathering spots." "Tell me more." Yu Yolmu tapped on the map. "Her plan is simple. I am to move along this course and collect coins as they come.
Then, at every gathering spot, I have to hand over all my coins to her." "Why?"
"Well, it's understandable. She doesn't trust me enough to leave the coins in my possession. And she's right not to trust. Look where I am now. The bitch is smart. So the situation is a bit difficult, but we still have an advantage." Yu Yolmu smirked. "She'll collect as many coins as she can, and then try to activate the gacha machine.
That's when we strike." A devious look crossed the young man's face.
"So what you're saying is that—" He licked his lips like a snake. "We should help the invited collect coins."
"That's right.
You guys just follow us quietly from behind. And whenever I come to you with a list of hidden spots, assist me in finding the coins. That way our search will take less time. And when we're done finding all the coins—" He glanced down at the map.
Next to the gacha machine, where the line ended, was the number 20.
"We'll turn on her and take all her coins."
"Yup. That's exactly right."
Yu Yolmu cackled, clapping his hands in joy.
"We can't see or even touch the privileges, but the coins." Yu Yolmu left his sentence unfinished on purpose.
Anyone with a working brain should know what would come next.
The corners of the young man's lips slowly curved upwards.
"I was just gonna take some passage fee, but this is better. Shoot for the stars, am I right?"
Is there a rule that prohibits a contracted from having a monopoly?
"No." The two men exchanged smiles. "Good. Now tell me about your group."
"How many of you are there?"
5 here, including me."
The young man replied, glancing over his shoulder at the party.
"And 3 more back at our cabin. So 8 in total." 8. I see. You should try to recruit more people. That way, we'll finish the search faster."
"Even more than now?"
"Look.
I know you want as many coins as possible, but let's be realistic. If that monster discovers us while we're searching, we're all doomed." The young man seemed doubtful.
"I don't know.
Isn't 8 enough?"
If we're too fast, then she might suspect something is wrong."
"I'll take care of that."
Actually, she's in a hurry. She says her plan is feasible and that everything will work out.
But why would she be in such a hurry if that really was the case?
Yu Yolemu's argument sounded logical and,
finally, the young man agreed.
Folding the map, Yu Yolmu spoke again.
Let's summarize. After we take the coins from her, we'll use 666 of them for the sacrifice, then divide the remaining coins among ourselves, in equal portions.
What you do afterward is nobody's concern but your own. Draw the gacha, pay the passage fee, whatever.
Got it?
Okay. Good. Then.
Yu Yolmu held out his hand, which was as big and sturdy as a pot lid, palm side up.
The young man smirked.
He then placed his coins on top of Yu Yolemu's palm.
And so, the number of people looking for coins increased from 3 to 11. The treasure hunt had begun.
After the difficulty level increased, Kim Hannah did not take her eyes off of the tutorial.
One could say that it was an emergency.
After all, Valhalla's representative could possibly die with one wrong move. The reason Kim Hannah was not praying desperately like Chohong or chirping to be let in like little chick was because Eun Yuri was surprisingly doing a good job.
She's smart.
That was the evaluation Kim Hannah gave Eun Yuri after 2 hours from the start of the second stage. Considering the fact that Kim Hannah did not easily give out compliments, this could be perceived as a major praise.
Fooling Park Wori and Yu Yolmu into joining her side and using the group of survivors who were trying to attack her was a brilliant performance, even if Kim Hannah took into account Eun Yuri's previous experience.
But that wasn't all. In order to comply with Sol Jihu's expectations, Eun Yuri had to get useful tools as quickly as possible. One common mistake among the survivors was that they did not keep into account the time spent putting the coins into the gacha machine.
It surprisingly took a significant amount of time to insert coins one by one.
Since Eun Yuri was experienced, she managed to successfully minimize the time needed to use the gacha machine. The method she chose was doing everything simultaneously.
First, she wrote down areas that were tricky to get to from the diary.
Then, Yu Yolmu, carrying the written list, would meet up with the group of survivors, who were following him from a distance, and they'd then look for the coins together.
It was obvious just from watching what was being played out.
Did you find them all?
Take 'em. There's 201 in total.
You aren't hiding any, right?
The moment that bitch starts suspecting us, it's over.
I didn't.
You can count them if you want.
I won't, but she will.
She doesn't make it obvious, but she's been loosely counting the stack with her eyes every time I bring the coins to her.
What a picky girl. By the way, how many more people do I have to get?
I'm trying to persuade people whenever I meet them for now. I've gathered around 16. With the coins collected, Yu Yolmu would head toward Eun Yuri before sneakily taking a turn.
He would then meet up with Park Wori, who would be using the gacha machine, and hand over the collected coins. How does it look? Have we got a fair amount?
I'm not sure. I got a leather armor and 2 spell balls, but… Yolmu Hung Nim, is this good enough?
Probably not, right?
I don't know.
It's hard to judge by ourselves.
This is driving me crazy. It would be better for us and the missus if it showed up faster. Tisk. How many coins do we have left? We found a bit over half of the coins. Anyway, give them to me first. No, I can do it. You keep pulling. All right.
You should leave the coins.
Of course. Right, the missus said it would be better to move after we've got a few. It might overlap with the route of the next search.
Really?
Can you show me the map for a second? For you to come easily. I'll move to the northwest machine. I'll meet you there next time.
Afterward, Yu Yolmu put the items Park Wori got in his bag and went back to Eun Yuri, who was searching for the easier-to-reach coins in a mountain resort.
Here are the items.
This won't do.
Then we'll need to pull more. Let's hurry. Here's the list of locations and the coins I found in the mountain resort.
Exactly 32 in total. Then I'll be heading out right away.
Thank you. I'll see you at the next meeting spot.
Yu Yolmu, with the list and coins from Eun Yuri, once again got in contact with the group of survivors. Then the cycle continued, endlessly, until they got every item they wanted or used up all the coins.
She's doing better than I expected, but
it was impressive that she designed the most effective route to move and gave orders calmly even in such a critical situation. Because of it, Kim Hannah began to look forward to finding out her temperament and aptitude. But since she was only doing the best she could do in the given situation, there were still some problems. God, it just won't come out.
Oh, Rahi muttered while watching Park Worry eagerly putting in more coins into the gotcha machine.
He wasn't so lucky. This was also the one concern Kim Hannah had, but nothing could be done about it since gotcha machines were based on luck. People could plan their actions, but it was the heavens that granted it. Since half of the coins were yet to be used, Kim Hannah decided to observe the situation for a while longer.
Yu Yolmu returned. Un Yuri sighed after checking the items in the bag.
It was a failure once again.
It wasn't that there was no progress.
They got some useful items such as potions, spell balls, and a leather armor. But if one were to ask if they could defeat the rampaging homunculus, Un Yuri would hesitate.
She simply didn't have any confidence.
What should I do?
Sol Jihu asked her to find a solid solution. But in the current situation, it was uncertain if they could find it this way through the gotcha machine.
Yu Yolmu spoke up when Un Yuri's face started to fill with uncertainty. Don't worry too much. It's not like we don't have any coins left, and gotcha machines really rely on luck.
He'll understand as well. Un Yuri raised her head and stared at Yu Yolmu, who was speaking with a deep voice.
He was the one who was having the hardest time at the moment.
It was obvious from how his clothes were drenched in sweat. He should be tired from running back and forth, but instead of complaining, he was comforting her. Although Un Yuri did not lower her guard, she definitely felt grateful.
That's right. I'll keep trying.
Sure.
You can hand that over. How's it going back there? They aren't getting suspicious?
It's fine for now. I've been making up excuses every time they ask. I will let you know if I see any suspicious movements.
Yu Yolmu left the mountain resort soon after receiving the note and the coins.
Once she heard the doors close, Un Yuri shook her head. He should be fine. He said he'd run away if it became too dangerous.
Since the rampaging homunculus wasn't running amok on the island, it was unlikely that Sol Jihu was defeated.
Moreover, Un Yuri did not have the time to be worried or tired. Even at this very moment, Sol Jihu should be risking his life to hold the homunculus back.
Let's go.
Un Yuri stepped forward energetically.
Then, she ran.
The whole island was dyed in a golden hue as the sun started setting.
Considering the fact that the second stage of the tutorial started around noon, a significant amount of time had passed.
Shit. Park Worry was still wrestling with the gotcha machine. He was restlessly inserting coins. Please. Come out now. Please.
Thousands of coins had already been inserted into the gotcha machine, and dozens of items had already appeared. It was about time that a useful weapon would come out, but the vast majority of the items being useless made Park Worry desperate. But more than anything, the fact that there could only be one coin inserted into the machine at a time was driving Park Worry mad. God damn it.
I want to see the face of the bastard that made this machine.
How sadistic must the creator be to make a machine like this?
What's wrong with being able to put tens or hundreds of coins in at once?
Oh, my hand hurts. Eventually, he frowned and massaged his thumb.
His fingerprints were overwritten with the coin patterns. I don't know who made this, but he must be a total asshole. Fuck. Whoever made this shit needs to pull the coins out of this machine one by one to get their salary. That will teach them a lesson. Park Worry, not knowing that the 7 gods did not receive salaries, held the coins tight as he complained. As he got ready to insert the coins in once again. He blinked rapidly. He tilted his head slightly as well. Ah! What number was I at? He forgot. In fact, he was not counting from the moment he took his hands off.
Counting and inserting coins endlessly had made him think that he was counting this time as well.
Ah! Shit.
Was I putting them in? Did I get a new item?
Although he tried to trace his memory back, he failed to remember and groaned. Ah! Whatever. I'll say I made a mistake.
Thinking they would not kill him for a little mistake, he started to insert the coins once again.
However, a vast number of coins were already inserted. Although Park Worry did not know, he had put close to 200 coins while he was grumbling. As he inserted 100 more, the machine had 300 coins in total. And the gacha machine had an item that could be pulled for 300 coins. Phew. Park Worry turned the lever, seeming tired of the situation. He no longer had any expectation from the machine, having lost all hope. Clunk. But when the item came out, Park Worry's bored eyes widened in surprise. It was an item he had never seen before.
Oh!
His jaw dropped as soon as he read the description. Asterisk. The problem broke out around the time they passed the 16th location. No, it did not happen yet, but it seemed that something would happen. When Yu Yolmu was about to head back after collecting the coins, the young man stopped him. I understand that there are still some coins left, but shouldn't we get going soon? The young man spoke as he looked back toward his resting companions. If it were up to me, I would pull as many items as possible, but a lot of people are frustrated. Everyone is exhausted from searching for hours. This wasn't too surprising. In the beginning, people cooperated wholeheartedly since they did not know when the monster would attack, but as they found a significant amount, some people began to think differently. Anyway, I was wondering what you thought. Yu Yolmu noticed that the survivors were paying attention to this conversation. He had to pick the right response. If he flat out rejected the notion, there was a huge chance they would start suspecting him. But he needed to earn enough time to sneak out once. Well, they said they're holding the monster back with their bonus privilege, but I can't be sure because I haven't seen it myself. Yu Yolmu continued as he pretended to be in thought. I guess going when we can isn't a bad idea. So you agree? Rather than agreeing, it's more that I don't really care. So you guys already made up your mind? No, not yet. We've got several different opinions. The young man shook his head. I actually think it's a bit of a shame. There are at least 800 coins left. If we don't collect them, it means we'll each get 50 less. That's true. Yu Yolmu slowly nodded and then continued. Anyway, it won't matter when we carry out our plan. We already know the route that bitch is going to take. The only question is when. That's true. Then let's do it this way. I'll go to her and see what she's up to. You guys discuss amongst yourselves and come to a decision by the time I come back. If we're going to continue with the search, we can search with the note I bring, and if we decide to quit, we could go and strike right away. Okay. So you're fine either way, right? Yeah. Anyway, don't fight and talk it out peacefully. The end is near, so there's no need to fight. Yu Yolmu turned away after an earnest plea. As he walked away with a fast pace, his expression had turned stiff. If they decide to keep searching, we'll have some time, but it's slowly getting dangerous. Although fleeing at this point seemed like the right choice, the decision belonged to Un Yuri. Yu Yolmu searched for Park Worry in a hurry after deciding to inform him of the situation and hand over the coins. But once Yu Yolmu arrived at the gacha machine, he was struck speechless. Park Worry, who had always been complaining and swearing as he inserted the coins, was packing his bag. Oh! Hung Nim, there you are. Park Worry seemed delighted to see him. What happened? Why? It happened. Finally. I finally pulled it. We did? Yu Yolemu's ears perked up. Are you sure? Park Worry grinned, then stood up with his bag. Lifting what he had in his left hand as if to show it off, he raised his thumb. Then, he shouted. Yes! Sol Jihu glared at the enemy while drawing a heavy breath. How long has it been since the fight began?
10 hours?
Sol Jihu spat out a cough and scrunched his brows.
The dried-up blood around his mouth, his limp left arm, and several other marks of a fierce battle showed his horrible state. The tracksuit Kim Hana bought for him had long since turned to rags, and pale blue bruises were visible all over his ribcage.
He seemed to be bleeding as well as there was a red stain on his side.
Despite his sorry state, he wasn't just taking a beating.
3 times.
That was the number of fatal blows he dealt the rampaging homunculus. Meaning, he would be able to eliminate the rampaging homunculus with 2 more fatal blows. However, Sol Jihu felt farther and farther away from the death of his enemy as the number of times the enemy could recover from mortal wounds decreased.
This was because the homunculus grew stronger with each revival.
After surviving a fatal blow, the homunculus would power up significantly.
It would develop new abilities like being able to extend its arms and legs, or its movements would grow sharper. This wasn't just Sol Jihu imagining things.
A little while ago, he shot out multiple mana spears in a fit of anger, one of which luckily hit the homunculus's vital spot and killed it. After it revived, it refused to let him attack the same area again.
Right, the rampaging homunculus was evolving through the fight. From a clueless child to a seasoned warrior.
Damned monster.
Sol Jihu cursed under his breath, coming to terms with the word, impossible, the more he fought. If only I had the spear of purity. Never mind the divine spear. He would be in a much better situation if he just had the Festina earring or the blessing of the circum. But knowing this was a useless thought, Sol Jihu shook off his regret. I guess there's no choice. In the end, he changed his mind to use another paper talisman. It was regrettable, but he did not have any other choice. He wanted to kill the homunculus with his own hands, but he wasn't confident in killing it 5 times. Let me kill it just one more time. He already had a plan. He originally planned to use the talisman to take the monster's 5th and final life, but using it now seemed okay too since he made up his mind.
After wrapping up his thoughts, Sol Jihu abruptly turned around. When he showed his defenseless back, just as he expected.
Ki! The homunculus let out a shrill cry.
It must have thought Sol Jihu was trying to escape. At the same time, a fierce gust of wind swept toward Sol Jihu. It's probably chasing after me with that bullet-like speed, Sol Jihu muttered inwardly before rousing his mana and activating Flash Thunder. Perhaps because he was running at full speed, he quickly reached a location he had eyed during the battle, a steep vertical cliff formed from red sedimentary rocks. As soon as the place entered his vision, Sol Jihu slowed down little by little to allow the rampaging homunculus to shorten the distance while not getting caught by it.
And thus, the distance between Sol Jihu and the cliff and the distance between Sol Jihu and the homunculus both quickly shortened.
By the time the cliff was right in front of his eyes, he felt something sharp on the cusp of piercing his neck.
Strength entered Sol Jihu's eyes.
In the next moment, before he made contact with the sharp thing, he twisted his body as much as possible and kicked off the ground in full force.
Tzzzzt. Along with a clap of thunder, the beam of light that was going straight abruptly turned to the left.
As a result, the hook that was on the verge of snatching his neck lost its target and smashed into the cliff. Quang! As a terrifying explosion struck his ears, Sol Jihu knew he succeeded.
Enduring the pain from twisting his body, he turned around.
Just as he expected, the homunculus had slammed into the cliff, buried shoulder deep.
He shivered when he imagined what would happen if the homunculus hit him instead, but he didn't dwell on it for too long. This was a rare opportunity that he had not come by in a while. Sol Jihu quickly fixed his posture and created a mana spear. He planned to attack the homunculus's vital spot while it was stuck and unable to defend. At least, that was the plan. Sol Jihu halted just as he was getting ready to rush in. The homunculus suddenly turned towards Sol Jihu, its jaw dropping. Before, Chawa.
A black beam of energy shot out.
Sol Jihu widened his eyes at the attack that resembled a dragon's breath. This was the first time he had seen such an attack.
The homunculus had been hiding a trump card just like Sol Jihu.
Shit! Startled, Sol Jihu roused his anti-evil energy in a hurry.
At the same time that a golden light flared up around his body, the black energy engulfed Sol Jihu like a tidal wave.
Kiu! He lost his sight. He couldn't see anything, as if he had been swallowed by pitch-black darkness. Although the evil incinerating essence of Soma devoured the darkness, the evil energy flooded in beyond the anti-evil energy's ability to fight back.
His current situation was like attempting to fight an army of 10,000 cavalry troops with a single machine gun.
I can't anymore. Feeling his mana plummet, Sol Jihu gave up on attacking and escaped the black energy. His vision returned once he barely managed to leave the breath's attack range. However,
What
was waiting for Sol Jihu when he jumped out to the side was a hook descending from the sky as if to shatter the earth. The homunculus had predicted Sol Jihu giving up and swung its arm down. Without taking a single breath, Sol Jihu followed his instincts and rolled on the ground. Quack! An explosive sound burst out as a scorching sensation swept through his back. Sol Jihu, fortunately, dodged the attack, but he continued to roll without stopping. From left to right, from right to left. Why? Quang! 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 Because the homunculus continued to strike down with its hook-shaped hand without stopping. Sol Jihu rolled until he began to grow dizzy. He did not know where he was heading until his body abruptly stopped. He had reached the cliff. Looking up in a daze, he saw the homunculus raising its long arm with a grin. Sol Jihu's pupils trembled. This was when Yuri returned with two others.
Having left the group of survivors as soon as she joined up with Park Wuri and Yu Yolmu, she had raced to where the loud crashing sounds were coming from.
And once they arrived, they were struck speechless. The severed bridge and the numerous craters on the ground were the least of the mess. Countless huge trees were strewn across the forest ground, pulled out by the root, and pieces of rocks were scattered everywhere. It didn't look like the scene of a one-on-one battle, but a medium-scale war that fully incorporated explosives. Ah! Over there! At that moment, Park Wuri shouted while pointing in a certain direction. Not far away, they could see the person they were so desperately searching for, and also the homunculus raising its arm sky high above this person. It looks like he's in danger. Park Wuri stuttered, seeing this scene that went beyond his expectations. There was nothing more to see. Throw it! Yuri shouted at the top of her lungs and threw the spell ball she had in her hand. Due to the homunculus's size, it wasn't difficult to hit it. The moment the spell ball touched the monster, it radiated a bright light and shot out beams of light. Park Wuri and Yu Yolmu came to their senses in the next moment and began to throw their spellballs as well. KRRRK? The homunculus was just about to finish off Sol Jihu but flinched when the suddenly generated light coiled around it like a spider web, immobilizing its victim. Glancing back, it saw more spell balls flying in and roared furiously. Gwa! With a single shake, the spiderweb was helplessly loosened. Although the spell balls that flew in caused electricity to crackle, the homunculus only flinched for a moment and did not seem damaged. In fact, it didn't even look like the electricity tickled it. The homunculus glared at the trio for a brief moment before turning back to Sol Jihu. This was as if it was saying, "I'll take care of this bastard first before killing the rest of you." At that moment, Park Wuri's eyes lit up. Right! He suddenly checked his phone, shouted, "Eureka!" and ran down with his leather bag. Where are you going? The horrified Yu Yolmu shouted in shock, but Park Wuri raced forward while shouting, "Cover me! Cover me!" He was running toward Sol Jihu. Yuri held the spell balls in her hands tight.
Judging by how he brought his leather bag along, he must be planning to hand over the item directly. While grateful, Yuri did not think he would reach Sol Jihu in time.
She had to buy time so that Park Wori could heal Sol Jihu and deliver the item. Whoop!
After taking a deep breath, Yuri gently bit her lower lip.
She put her arms forward, then shot her eyes open.
Clenching her teeth hard, she squeezed out every ounce of her energy.
Ewing!
Tiny beads of sweat formed on her forehead as she focused intensely. Soon, rather than throwing the spell ball, Yuri let go of it as if to push it away.
Meanwhile, Hung Nim! Hung Nim! Park Wori was calling Sol Jihu's name yearningly. He didn't even spare a glance toward the homunculus, only looking at Sol Jihu as he ran. Your brother, Forward Park, is here. Park Wori shouted after managing to reach Sol Jihu successfully. However, Sol Jihu didn't understand a word he said. Although he could see fine, he had a severe case of tinnitus in his ears. The only thing he could hear was faint sounds of explosions. That said, he still understood why Park Wori came because his hands were moving just as fast as his mouth. Didn't I tell you I would pay you back for your kindness? This is the kind of man I am. He held his leather bag upside down, rattled everything out, then plugged a bottle into Sol Jihu's mouth. Sol Jihu's eyes widened as some kind of liquid began to flow down his throat. It's a healing potion. He wanted to tell Park Wori to splash the bottle on his wounds as well, but realized there was no need as Park Wori grabbed all the bottles he could and began to splash it over his body or chug it down his throat. The effect was immediate. The swelling on his left arm subsided, the tingling pain on his side vanished, and the tinnitus symptoms disappeared as well. The body, which was crying out in agony, began to fill up with vigor. It seemed there was a vitality potion among the bottles. Sol Jihu's mind became wide awake. His dimmed eyes recovered their light as he shot up from the ground. Hung Nim! He finally heard Park Wori's voice. Looking down at him in a daze, Sol Jihu blinked rapidly. What? Why didn't the homunculus do anything? It just didn't make sense. How? Sol Jihu looked up and instantly doubted his eyes. The homunculus was still staring at him with its right arm still stuck inside the cliff. It wasn't moving at all. No. Guo! It eked out a raspy cry and swayed. Then, it leaned against the cliff with a thud. What? Witnessing this unexpected sight, Sol Jihu couldn't help but be flustered. There was only one reason the homunculus would show such a reaction, when it received a fatal injury. Hung Nim! Here it is! At that moment, Park Wori pushed something toward him. It was a long stick with a button on top. One-time weapon summon. Replica. Press the button to summon a weapon of your imagination. This weapon can only be used within the tutorial and has only 70% of the real weapon's power. When used, it disappears automatically after 10 minutes. Sol Jihu's eyes lit up once he finished reading the item description. Thank you. He quickly snapped the weapon out of Park Wori's hands and pressed the button. Then, the stick let out a bright glow before transforming into the shape of a spear. Though it was only a replica, it was the spear of purity he had been wanting so desperately. Perfect. Just by grabbing the spear shaft, a sense of satisfaction spread from his hand. Now that he had a weapon and his body recovered. You son of a bitch. Sol Jihu gritted his teeth and glared at the homunculus with pent-up rage. The homunculus must have regenerated in the meanwhile as it was getting out of the cliff while glaring back at Sol Jihu. Ki! It swung its hooked claw again, but Sol Jihu changed his posture first. Cut! Sol Jihu swung the spear down following the direction of the hook's descent, and the homunculus's wrist was cut off like butter. Although the area regenerated quickly, the homunculus flinched. It instinctively realized that something was different than before. It swung its arm again with an unknown fear. Strike. But when Sol Jihu struck with a spear in full force, its wrist blew up. A replica of a divine spear was just as terrifying as the original as it displayed supreme resistance to evil. Sol Jihu smiled joyfully. This was it. This was the feeling. This was the taste he wanted. When he was using the machete, he felt like he was wearing clothes that didn't fit him. Now that he had his main weapon, everything seemed to be working properly. Only now did the homunculus begin to seriously pull its arm out of the cliff. Sol Jihu did not know how the homunculus lost its life just now, but he decided to think about it later. Letting the monster free its arm would only make things more tiring for him. Sol Jihu wasn't someone who would let go of trapped prey. Say. Peetst. Brilliant sparks flared up from Sol Jihu's body as sword chi shot out of his spear blade. Your last words. As he fully roused his high mana, a golden current broke through his skin and undulated around him. Jiraiya Matthew, who was killed by Sol Jihu, mistook him for a level 6 when he saw him in this state. Shortly afterward, a golden flash rushed toward the entrapped homunculus. Asterisk. Same time. What happened? Oh, Rahi frowned while watching the screen. Why did it sway back then? Did anyone see? It was struck by spell balls. Kazuki was the one who answered. Oh, Rahi's eyebrows went up. Spell balls? You think that makes sense? The attack mixed the poisonous fog spell and the ignite spell. It's the strongest combination of spells available from the spell balls. But still, I don't think that monster would be done in by mere spell balls. That would be the case normally. Kazuki nodded his head in agreement. But it's not like the homunculus is without weak points. Weak points? Its vital spots, I mean. Are you kidding me? What vital spot does it have other than its head and core? Oh, Rahi rebutted with a confused look. It would be a different story if these vital spots were focused by sword chi or mana spears which had high default output. You're saying the two spell balls with the weakest penetrative power dug through its outer skin and attacked its vital spot? Kazuki took his eyes off the screen. Turning to Oh Rahi slowly, he raised his hand. He then raised his index finger and pointed at his head. Here. To be more precise, he was pointing at his ear. The attack went through here. What? The spell balls were put inside the homunculus's ears, then detonated. Hearing this, Oh Rahi's expression froze for a moment. Ha! In the next moment, she snorted like she'd just heard a ridiculous tale. Interesting. Is one of them a professional baseball player or something? Sure. The homunculus wasn't moving, but throwing spell balls from that distance and making it go into its ears perfectly? Oh Rahi could say with confidence that that was bullshit. She's not a baseball player. Kazuki continued calmly. But I think she used mana. Quote. She didn't throw the spell balls either. She let go of them lightly, and they went into the homunculus's ears on their own. Oh Rahi, who was maintaining a straight face until now, broke down. Though they were a little shaky, I clearly saw them turn in midair. Something like that is near impossible without the use of mana. So you're saying? Oh Rahi spoke dumbfoundedly as if she heard a new type of bullshit. That someone who hasn't gone through the neutral zone's awakening chamber used mana. Quote. And not only did she use mana, but she also controlled it? Kazuki closed his mouth. Although he was the one who said it, he knew it was completely absurd. Oh Rahi tilted her chin up and looked up at the ceiling. Ace Kazuki. She spoke with a sigh. I'm disappointed. I didn't think you were a man who enjoyed such lame jokes. I only said what I saw. Kazuki shrugged. I'm also dying to know just who this woman is. On the other hand, Kim Hannah, who was listening in on their conversation, fixed her gaze at the screen once again. Although the tutorial was coming to an end, her mind was in disarray. From a common sense standpoint, Rahi's doubt was fully justified. But Kazuki didn't look like the type to lie either.
Just what happened?
Kim Hana stared at Yuri fixedly. Was she influenced by the awakening she went through before? Or… wait. A thought crossed her mind once she contemplated deeply. Wasn't there something Yuri obtained from the necessary boxes other than the 3 paper talismans? The first thing she obtained was… It was then.
Just as she was about to remember, Kim Hana felt her neck being pulled down. Glancing down, she saw Sol Jihu's pendant shaking left and right in a fuss, moving toward the screen.
Flown? What's… Kim Hana shut her mouth before finishing her sentence. It was because she remembered how Flown was going, "Mueeee," and crying just a moment ago. That's it. Right. Flown had already left the pendant. Kill it. That's right. Squash it flat. Seeing Sol Jihu flickering here and there on the screen, Flown was flailing her arms and cheering him on. Kim Hana looked down at the pendant again. When she lowered her upper body slightly, the pendant approached a screen that was different than the one showing Sol Jihu. Not only was it sticking close to it, but it was looking like it would pierce right through it. It almost seemed like the pendant was intently observing Yuri, who was heavily panting on the ground. Kung! A thunderous thud rang out as a huge body fell on the ground. The homunculus had collapsed. It did everything it could to move its immobilized body, but its flame of life had flickered off as soon as it pulled its arm out of the cliff. Sol Jihu's one-sided barrage wasn't something it could handle, even though the Spear of Purity was only a replica. But that wasn't the only reason. There was another attack that dealt a fatal blow to the homunculus' final life. Sol Jihu blankly stared at the homunculus corpse as it turned into dust. What? He couldn't see properly when he was lying on the ground, but this time he got a clear look. As he was slashing away at the enemy in excitement, 2 spell balls had flown into the homunculus' nostrils. The homunculus pulled its arm out immediately afterward and then froze up on the spot. Was this how the homunculus was killed before? Sol Jihu thought deeply as his expression slowly contorted. It was just too absurd. But because he had seen it with his own eyes, he couldn't deny it. It wasn't as if it happened only once. Since she succeeded twice, it was hard to chalk it up to luck. Looking back, the homunculus was completely focused on Sol Jihu until its death. So he could say that Yuri attacked while he was drawing the homunculus aggro, but the process had to be discussed before the result. It wasn't as if the homunculus stayed still. It was flailing about in a frenzy, yet Yuri had succeeded in putting the spell balls in the monster's ear. He would have accepted this as a possibility if a renowned sniper, like Marcel Guionia, was here. Even then, it would only be a possibility, not a guarantee. A survivor managed to accomplish what even the Archer of Steel wasn't guaranteed to succeed. It wasn't as if she sniped the homunculus either. She controlled the spellballs like they were alive. What is going on? It was at this time that a gust of wind blew the pile of dust away. Sol Jihu's eyes lit up. He found something where the homunculus corpse disappeared. Right. It would be strange if there wasn't an additional reward for accomplishing something like this. Sol Jihu paused his thoughts and walked forward. A palm-sized square box was left behind on the spot where the homunculus fell. It seemed to have been made with a transparent material, but it looked black because a jet-black energy was swirling inside it. This is Harmonia Magic Square. A crystal that can balance the foundation of a magic square. Created by a black mage, its original name is Magia Quadratum ex Harmonia. A magic square refers to a square grid filled with natural numbers in the range 1 to n2 such that the sum of the integers in each row, column, and diagonal are equal. Following this law, the black mage created a new formula that can balance any mixture of elements. Because the formula was made with the reversal of energies in mind, it cannot be said to be perfect. But despite being an imperfect formula, if the user accepts the risk and attempts to control it,
they will be able to, temporarily, control conflicting energies. The energy of absolute evil is currently rampaging inside the crystal. A long time is needed for this energy to subside. To erase the energy of absolute evil and infuse a new energy into it, the crystal will need to be purified.
Ooh. Sol Jihu didn't fully understand everything that was in the long description, but he could tell that this was an amazing item. Although consuming it didn't result in a powerful energy like with the ice essence, it seemed possible to obtain immense power by using it properly. While Sol Jihu was fiddling around with the box, Un Yuri and Yu Yolmu had run up to Sol Jihu. They judged that the fight was over since the homunculus disappeared and had gone down in a hurry.
"Are you okay?"
Un Yuri asked nervously. Although Park Worry healed him using potions, she couldn't help but worry after seeing him covered in a cloud of dirt. Sol Jihu looked straight at Un Yuri. "Miss Un Yuri." A survivor had used mana. He had more than a few questions for her, but this was the one thing he had to ask no matter what. "How did you do it?" "Huh. I saw it. I want to know how you did it," he asked as soon as he saw her. "I don't know." But the answer wasn't quite what he was hoping for. "You don't know?" "No. I was so flustered that I don't remember well. I think it just happened when I tried." Sol Jihu furrowed his brows. He wanted to ask, "How is that possible?" But he held himself back. Depending on his tone, it could sound like he was chastising her. At that moment, the replica spear of purity's duration ran out and disappeared. With his hand now empty, Sol Jihu reached into his pocket, took out the chunk of ice that encased the ice flower and waved it in the air. "I won't give this to you if you don't tell me." "Ah." Un Yuri did a double take. She ran up to Sol Jihu and reached toward the ice on tippy toes. Of course, Sol Jihu wasn't the type to give in easily. He raised the arm high, making Un Yuri's hand stir around the air in vain. "Give it to me." "Should I? I won the competition. Give it to me fair and square." "Fair and square aside, tell me how you did it. This is yours if you come out clean." "Ooh." When Un Yuri couldn't reach the ice even when she jumped, she stuck out her lower lip in a pout. The way she was grimacing heavily, it was clear that she was vexed. "Liar." She even grumbled. But seeing that Sol Jihu showed no signs of putting down his arm, she sighed quietly. "I think it's because of the ability I got from the bonus privilege." "Ability?" "Mana circuit application, I mean." Sol Jihu blinked rapidly. Now that he thought about it, Un Yuri said her status window changed when she opened the first necessary box. "You said the necessary box gives what the user needs the most." "Right, I did. Before I opened the necessary box back then, I thought to myself, I wish I could use mana again. Well, to be precise, I wished it would move as I wanted it to." "Wait, did you just say, again?" "Yes. Don't you know? I went through the awakening chamber in the neutral zone." Sol Jihu exclaimed quietly. This meant she had felt mana before. She must have returned to an unawakened state by dying within the neutral zone, but it was true that she still experienced it before. Summing things up, that mysterious ability must have helped her awaken her mana circuit. But still. Sol Jihu tilted his head. Even if he made 100 concessions and took everything Un Yuri said at face value, his doubt did not disappear. This was because feeling mana was completely different than rousing and utilizing mana. Not to mention, releasing mana externally to manipulate objects was difficult for most Earthlings. An arrow could not change direction once it left the string. This immutable law applied to Paradise as well. Unless one acquired a skill like Ace Kazuki's Swallow Arrow, or used a high-level redirection magic spell, it was impossible to change this physical law. When Sol Jihu asked about this point, Un Yuri's reply surprised him. "It worked though." It just worked. Saying so, Un-yuri bent down and picked up a rock. She repeated tossing it into the air and catching it before tossing it hard.
When she pointed her finger at the rising rock and drew a circle in the air, something astonishing happened. Although the rock was still falling, following the law of gravity, it was noticeably slow.
It even spun following the movement of Un-yuri's finger. Once the rock gently landed on Un-yuri's palm, Sol Jihu's jaw dropped. Un-yuri held the rock tight and tilted her head. "Is this supposed to be hard?"
The way she said it, she made it sound like it was child's play.
Of course, that was probably not what she intended, but Sol Jihu couldn't help but interpret it that way. This girl. And Sol Jihu. She's so full of herself.
Screamed internally. But in truth, this wasn't something Sol Jihu should say as someone who started with future vision and 9 eyes, innate abilities and all kinds of privileges.
I can't believe it. Just what kind of insane talent does she have?
Sol Jihu couldn't help but feel jealous for the first time in his life once he saw a talent that could only be described as overwhelming.
But who could blame him?
After all, the realm Sol Jihu put a great deal of effort to achieve had been caught up by Un-yuri in an instant. My talent is only average.
At this point, Sol Jihu was wondering whether Un-yuri's talent went beyond prodigy and reached the level of genius.
Of course, he couldn't make a hasty conclusion since Russell said that the chance of a genius appearing was 1 in 1,000 years.
So it's really possible to get this far with just talent.
Sol Jihu sighed inwardly before deciding to look at this in a positive way. Such a capable individual entering paradise wasn't a bad thing at all. If anything, it would be the parasite queen's concern, not his.
Looks like we should get to the neutral zone as soon as possible.
After organizing his thoughts, Sol Jihu looked at Un-yuri, who was juggling several rocks without using her hands.
How many coins do you have left? We got rid of the homunculus. It's time to head to the neutral zone now. The rocks all fell. No. But Un-yuri surprisingly rejected the idea. Not yet. Speaking in a firm voice, she glanced behind her.
There, a dozen or so people were looking down at them, each glaring with a furious expression.
Yu Yolmu, who was standing silently,
smiled awkwardly and waved his hand.
This was his way of saying, "Good job," to them.
Those people are. They're all bastards.
When Sol Jihu asked who they were, Park Worry immediately snitched on them.
Those sons of bitches wanted to backstab you.
They schemed to steal the coins we worked so hard to gather. Oh ho! Sol Jihu looked up at the group with a chuckle.
He was actually worried that the other survivors might scheme against Un-yuri, but the fact that they were in this current situation must mean that Un-yuri broke through the crisis well.
Those people.
To be honest, he didn't think much of the other survivors until the point when he killed the 6th mother. Since they were all precious customers who would spend survivor points in the neutral zone, he planned to close his eyes and bring them along with him. This was why he swallowed his indignation and let them be when they escaped on their own at the gathering point. But after finding out that they tried to backstab Un-yuri, the little patience Sol Jihu had left, vanished. If you're a guest, you need to act like one.
Sol Jihu felt like he couldn't rest easy until he taught them a lesson. However, he soon realized that he didn't need to take the matter into his hands. Because Un-yuri's eyes lit up as she looked up at the crowd. Sol Jihu decided to look for the remaining coins at Un-yuri's request. The amount they had now was more than enough, and because Park Worry pulled a good number of random coin boxes from the gacha machine, they had enough coins for the 3 survivors, Un-yuri, Park Worry, and Yu Yolmu, to pass. But Un-yuri said there was something she really wanted to do, so Sol Jihu did not press the matter any further. After all, looking for the coins wasn't anything difficult. While they were searching for the coins following the diary of an unknown survivor, Sol Jihu could not hide his shock after hearing how Un-yuri gathered the coins so quickly. Of course, he didn't forget to recognize the two men's contributions.
I have to thank you both.
Especially you, Mr. Yu Yolmu. It must have been hard running back and forth for so long. It's nothing.
Stamina is the only thing I have a lot of. Yu Yolmu smiled innocently like a simple country bumpkin.
You'll be repaid in the neutral zone. Thank you. Hung Nim.
What about me? What about me?
As Yu Yolmu bowed, Park Worry cut in right away. You too, Mr. Park Worry.
Sol Jihu said with a smile.
Anyway, you were more daring than I thought. How did you think to run all the way here with the bag?
To be honest, I was a little scared.
But I had confidence in making it out alive.
Confidence?
This.
Park Worry showed Sol Jihu his cell phone. After reading the third precaution given in the guide's note, Sol Jihu's eyes widened. Guided by the grudge of absolute evil looming over the island, the homunculus target will, first, be the survivor who annihilated the sixth mother.
Taking notice of the word, first, Sol Jihu's jaw dropped. He began to understand why Park Worry ran at him so madly.
But, you could have died with me.
It emphasizes the word, first. Hung Nim didn't look so easy to kill. Plus, I was getting support from the back. Hee hee.
As Park Worry gave a silly laugh, Sol Jihu looked at him in a renewed way.
He had not expected much from the man, but Park Worry's wits weren't ordinary. Sol Jihu didn't know what class Park Worry would end up with, but being witty and having the ability to read the atmosphere were outstanding characteristics to have in paradise. After all, even with his poor status window, Park Dungchun had survived in paradise with nothing but his superb wits. Just like that, the four people looked for the remaining coins in a friendly atmosphere. Although the remaining survivors chased after them while gritting their teeth, they didn't dare to do anything to Sol Jihu's group. How could they muster up the courage when Sol Jihu would summon a mana spear and shatter nearby rocks and trees whenever he was bored? Once Sol Jihu pointed his hand at the group of survivors and made a couple of fake throwing gestures. The group turned tails and scattered. As a result, the four of them could find the remaining coins without any trouble. BZZ. Once they found all the coins, the cell phones rang.
A message had arrived alerting them that Stage 2 had ended and that they should gather in the central altar. However, Sol Jihu did not immediately head to the center of the island.
Now that he thought about it, there was one more item he needed to get before entering the neutral zone.
As such, he went to a nearby gacha machine, made Un Yuri pull out the guide's note, then put in 666 coins to pull the offering before heading to the altar. Several people were already gathered at the altar. Un Yuri did not give them a single glance and put the offering on the altar. When the portal was activated, Phi Sora appeared as if she had been waiting for it.
Congratulations Tilda, with this, the tutorial has ended.
Well, passing it is another matter though.
Phi Sora applauded Un Yuri. She looked like she was in a good mood.
But it was no surprise why Phi Sora saw Un Yuri so favorably. After all, Un Yuri had helped save Sol Jihu and monopolized the coins to screw over the other survivors. There are 28 of you here.
Well, 27 if we exclude the helper.
Anyway, I see that only 3 people are eligible to pass.
Phi Sora glanced at the group of survivors standing speechlessly and grinned.
Isn't this cheating? The young man, who was looking at Yu Yolmu and gritting his teeth, shouted with a smudged face.
Shut it, fuckhead. Of course, it didn't work. Cheating, my ass.
You're the fools for falling for it. What? What did you say?
You sure talk big for someone who was trying to backstab your benefactor and got caught.
Have you no conscience? The young man's expression distorted.
Fuck, are you really a guide? Listen, we all have organizations we are contracted to.
A female survivor raised her voice as well.
It was the woman who claimed to have escaped the first island on her own and tried to pin the responsibility on Sol Jihu.
HMPH. Phi Sora snorted before looking back at Yuri. "Honey, can you give those guys enough coins to let them through?"
"Why?" "So I can kill them with my own hand. Once the neutral zone ends, of course."
"Ah. They're bringing up contracts like it's some magical blessing."
"I'm curious what organizations are behind them." The coldness in her voice made the survivors flinch.
"Don't worry.
Our representative is someone who trashed all 8 organizations of our city just because he didn't like them.
Against organizations that can only afford to bring contracted HMPH." Phi Sora glanced at someone while talking, and Yuri's gaze moved accordingly.
Sol Jihu averted their gazes.
Soon, Yuri called Yu Yolmu for her preconceived plan. When she asked him to point out the survivors who did not chase after her, Yu Yolmu pointed out 6 people while trying to jog his memory.
Most of them had trouble moving from injuries.
"Tell me how many coins you found."
When Yuri asked,
the 6 people got their hopes up and told her the number of coins in their possession.
And their expectations soon became reality. Yuri gave them enough coins to allow them to pass and even heal their injuries.
Like the saying, "You can go halfway just by staying still," the 6 people rejoiced at their fortune and expressed their thanks. After saving some of the survivors, Yuri turned to the remaining 16 survivors.
"Tell me how many coins you each have." When she asked the same question, the survivors broke out into murmurs. "I have 2. 4. I have 4. There weren't many who possessed coins.
They had offered up all the coins they gathered from the list, so the only coins they had were the ones they found after they realized they had been tricked.
11 in total. Yuri nodded gracefully.
"What should I do?"
"I don't have 1,589 coins.
But Sol Jihu, who was standing behind her, could clearly see that Yuri was stealthily picking out coins from her coin bag.
"Here are the extra coins." She immediately drew the survivors' attention.
They all looked at her nervously, knowing that the final decision rested on her.
"I can't decide which person I should give them to, so." Yuri trailed off and then grabbed a handful of coins from the bag. "Next."
"Take them."
She tossed them into the air.
As 15 or so coins scattered everywhere, everyone's gazes chased the coins in a daze. However, Yuri didn't stop at just once.
She grabbed another 6 handfuls and threw them in every direction. Because she was using mana, they flew far, far away. "You!"
The young man glared at her, but he didn't have any time to speak.
The more quick-witted ones were already on the move.
Soon, the 16 people scattered to search for the coins. "How many did you throw?"
When the blankly staring Sol Jihu asked, Yuri put her mouth against his ear and whispered. 88. I threw exactly 88 coins. I mixed in a good number of pebbles, so it should have looked like a lot more. Sol Jihu quickly calculated in his head.
There were 16 survivors left, and they had 11 coins with them.
Since Yuri threw 88 coins, even if they found them all.
"Ha!
You pass."
Phi Sora, who was eavesdropping on their conversation, announced Yuri's acceptance.
"I haven't seen such a likable girl like you in a long time. Come here. Let's see your disposition and calculate the survival points you'll receive."
Phi Sora called over the 9 survivors who passed the second stage and began to explain about one's disposition. Once the explanation ended, the time to distribute survival points naturally came. First up was Yuri.
"Let's see, starting from the cannibal killer."
Phi Sora murmured for a bit before looking at Yuri. "Do I have to list it all?"
"There's just too much. You can just tell me the total points then." "Fantastic. In the basic tutorial, you can receive 100 points for each category and receive an additional 100 bonus points. But this is multiplied by 20 times in the special tutorial." Phi Sora then added that she had to recalculate her score for saving the 6 survivors just now. After a while, she continued. 12,240 base points. Having the mark of survival makes that 122,400 points. Yuri gasped. She could not even imagine earning so many points when she took the basic tutorial in the past.
This absurd number was the result of the special tutorial's significantly increased base points and the gold grade mark of survival adding a 10x multiplier.
Congratulations. Now all you have to do is spend the coins and enter the portal. After obediently handing over the coins, Yuri paused and looked back. Seol Ji-hoo was watching the survivors who ran off. They must have realized that there weren't enough coins as dogfights were breaking out everywhere. The young man who acted as the de facto leader of the survivors was lying on the ground like a frog, shaking. Seeing as how blood was flowing down his temple, he seemed to have been hit in the head with a rock. There was also a survivor who was screaming while their hair was getting pulled. Although this person resisted fiercely, the assailant managed to steal from the wailing person. Similar things were happening everywhere. It was a horrible sight, like a scene from hell. Hee hee. Suddenly, laughter broke out. Seol Ji-hoo flinched and looked on with a startled face. She's laughing? Did she feel his gaze? Yuri quickly erased her madness-filled smile. We can go in, right? Speaking courteously, she pulled on Seol Ji-hoo's sleeve. She was asking him to come. Yes, we can. Seol Ji-hoo nodded unwittingly. The two walked past the survivors who were getting their share of the survival points. Before stepping into the portal, Seol Ji-hoo activated his 9 eyes. Now that Yuri's disposition was actualized, he was curious about what level of cognition she had. The first slot was delicate. He glossed over this since this was how other people saw her. The second slot was happy. Since this slot revealed her current emotion, he understood it fully. The neutral zone was right in front of her, after all. As the third slot, Seol Ji-hoo furrowed his brows in the next moment. 5. Level of cognition. Delicate, detailed and irreproachable. Happy, coy. Is innocent on the surface but is impure on the inside. Impure? Was this referring to her sexual character or moral character? 1. Judging by the laugh just now, I'd say it's closer to the latter. Seol Ji-hoo gulped as he watched Yuri disappear into the portal. Was he mistaken in thinking that he saw 9 fox tails wagging behind her? His throat became parched. Sandalwood was fragrant even as a seed leaf. He may have just brought someone who would change Paradise's 6 crazies into 7 crazies. 1. This is slightly difficult to translate. The word used here has 2 meanings. You can think of it as a homonym. It sounds the same but is different depending on the hanja used. One means sexually impure, yin, lustful, lewd, etc. The other means morally impure, yin, insidious, black-hearted, etc. The tutorial ended. Marcel Guionia led the survivors who passed Area 1 to a place with a stage, much like a theater. Seol Ji-hoo did not go with them. Although he was a helper during the tutorial, it was time to go back to his role as the head manager. He was the one originally responsible for activating synchronization and explaining the goal of the neutral zone to all area participants. But he entrusted this role to Kim Hana. This was because the fatigue that had been building up inside him finally exploded the moment he entered the neutral zone. It was only natural, considering the amount of work he had to put up with before the activation of the neutral zone, plus the fact that he had just fought with an atrocious monster for hours in a tutorial that he thought was going to be an easy breezy. So after delegating his job to Kim Hana, he headed to the manager's room. So there was a place like this. The head manager's room resembled a secret monitor room often seen in movies. Every communication crystal inside the tower was connected to this room, so the manager could keep an eye on all parts of the neutral zone. Looking around, Seol Ji-hoo smiled. He had discovered a small chick dozing off on the couch. Hey, you. How have you been? Piak? When Seol Ji-hoo picked him up,
The chick squirmed in his grip, unhappy with being woken up.
With a grin, Sol Ji-hoo sat on the couch and leaned back. The chick yawned and curled up on top of Sol Ji-hoo's chest. At that moment, one of the many monitors in the room displayed Kim Hana speaking in front of a crowd. Sol Ji-hoo watched, stroking the soft feathers of the baby chick with his fingers. You will have to gather 1,000 survival points during your 3-month stay here at the neutral zone. Kim Hana's explanation was more straightforward than that of Chinzia.
By properly announcing the set period and specifying goals, she helped the participants learn the direction they needed to take in tackling the problem at hand.
Her explanation was simply flawless, but Sol Ji-hoo didn't pay much attention to it.
Not only did he know most of the information already, but he was also distracted by Seo Yuhui and how she looked in her suit.
On the other hand, he couldn't help but laugh when the camera showed Hugo in his excessively tight suit and Yi Sung-jin with a dopey face. With his eyes half closed and his lips grinning, Sol Ji-hoo continued to watch until he finally started to nod off. It wasn't long before he fell asleep, sitting upright on the couch. When he opened his eyes again, Sol Ji-hoo realized that he was in a strange situation. He was sitting with his leg up on a table and a teacup in his hand in a garden. A pair of hands was massaging his shoulders quite skillfully from behind. He didn't even have to ask. This wasn't the first time he visited this place, so he was no longer surprised. Sol Ji-hoo spoke calmly, enjoying the taste of tea in his mouth. This tea tastes great.
Why, thank you. As expected, a dreamy voice came from behind him.
I prepared it especially for you, respected visitor Nim. Listening to the soft voice, Sol Ji-hoo smiled. He knew why she called him here. Sol Ji-hoo cleared his throat. Kuum, you didn't call me when I really needed you. Oh my. I was quite busy. I had my hands full with teaching Charlotte Arya. Foo-foo. Still,
how could you cut me off just like that? Honestly, I was a little upset.
I'm sorry. I'm begging you, please don't be mad at me. Russell patted Sol Ji-hoo's shoulder affectionately, speaking in a nasal voice.
Sol Ji-hoo chuckled softly.
Never in a million years would he have guessed that the terrifying witch who once tried to destroy the empire would try to curry favor with him.
Anyhow, because he didn't want to risk his life by irritating her, Sol Ji-hoo decided to drop the act and ask her the question he was extremely curious about.
I'm surprised. I didn't expect you to call me here so soon. And I never thought I'd get this excited. In fact, I even lost my composure watching and spat out curses. Oofoo-foo-foo.
Curses?
Yes. Truthfully, I don't remember a thing, but Charlotte Arya informed me so. Russell smiled. Damn. What talent.
Just where the hell has she been all this time? Was apparently what I said.
I was also told that I was jumping up and down in euphoria. Though, I suspect Charlotte Arya might have exaggerated a little. It seemed that Russell felt sorry that Un Yuri had no experience with magic until now.
Is she that amazing?
Sol Ji-hoo put his cup down and turned around.
A genius, perhaps?
A genius.
Suddenly, Russell fell silent.
She looked up at the sky with her hand still on Sol Ji-hoo's shoulder.
After a moment of silence, Russell replied.
Well, I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
Because these kinds of standards are subjective, particularly in a case such as this. There is no absolute standard for evaluating a person. So the evaluation is always relative. I guess you're right. Sol Ji-hoo pretended to agree while wondering all along what Un Yuri's talent would look like compared to Russell's. But he thought it would be rude to ask. Of course, he did this because he knew Russell could read his mind. My, aren't you cunning?
As expected, Russell read Sol Ji-hoo's mind and giggled.
I'm sorry, but if you'd like to compare her to me, that's another reason for me to postpone my judgment.
How come?
I take pride in the achievements of my later years.
Because I know myself well, I have no choice but to use stricter standards.
In other words, though Russell acknowledged that Yuri was gifted, she couldn't decide for sure if Yuri's talent exceeded hers at this point in time. Even with that, Seol Ji-hoo was satisfied. For Russell, the prideful and unparalleled genius, to contemplate this matter seriously, that certainly was something. I understand. Seol Ji-hoo smacked his lips.
If that's the case, how about you give her a month or so?
She has to wait until the awakening chamber activates to get her class. I plan to have her focus on physical training in the meantime. No. Russell shook her head.
I agree that she needs physical training.
Magicians need stamina to maintain stronger spells for longer durations. But
she paused for a second before continuing. I don't see any reason to wait. The training takes place in sleep, so we won't have to worry about intruding on each other's training time.
And I don't care if she's an archer, a priest, or a warrior. No matter what her class is, she's destined to walk down the path of magic.
Seol Ji-hoo widened his eyes at Russell's declaration. Her eyes that were still fixed on the sky, grew dim.
Yes.
That's right. That genuine, overwhelming, innate sense for mana. That is pure talent and nothing less.
Russell announced confidently. I have no doubts.
The decision is ultimately hers, but if she chooses not to study magic, it will be a great loss to her country, no, to the world. Did I just hear a huge compliment? After a moment's thought, Seol Ji-hoo nodded. He decided it would be best to follow the expert's advice.
Then, Seol Ji-hoo said, tilting a cup of tea that was now slightly cold. Things will start to get busy from now on. Of course, not for him, but for Yuri. Asterisk. The next day, when he woke up, Seol Ji-hoo realized he was lying in bed. Someone seemed to have moved him here from the couch. There were neatly folded clothes by the bedside. Smiling, Seol Ji-hoo got up from his bed. He took a shower, put his clothes on, and left the room. He then saw Yuri eating alone at a table in one of the cafeterias. She didn't seem very enthusiastic about the food, but her face brightened when she saw Seol Ji-hoo approach. Hello. Good morning.
Did you sleep well?
I did, for the first time in a long time. My room was very nice.
Ah, you mean the first ranker's room?
It's a nice room, the best in the neutral zone, in fact. No official report had been received yet, but there was no doubt in his mind that Yuri was the top ranker. In order to make the most of that room, Seol Ji-hoo paused and put on a bitter look. He noticed Yuri's spoon was moving faster than ever, as if her appetite had suddenly returned. Like a kitten, she was wary of everything, but now that the mother cat was here, it seemed that she felt safe enough to bury her head in the food bowl. Why were you not eating earlier? I just felt awkward eating alone. Yuri glanced sideways. Looking up, Seol Ji-hoo quickly understood what she meant. Some people were watching Yuri from outside the cafeteria, clutching their hungry stomachs. Come to think of it, it was still their first day in the neutral zone. People with 0 survival points couldn't afford a meal. You should have called Park Wuri or Yu Yolmu. Yuri did not answer. She went on eating in a hurry, afraid that her mother cat was going to leave. Seol Ji-hoo continued, listen as you eat. Now that you've reached the neutral zone. Well, I suppose you've already learned the basics from Kim Hana. I remember. Yuri swallowed a spoonful of rice while wiping the sauce off the corner of her mouth. Don't worry. I'll definitely keep my promise. Seol Ji-hoo shook his head. Well, there's that too, but more importantly, do you remember me telling you that Valhalla would help you as much as possible? Yes. Yuri answered without hesitation. I'll do as you say. Seol Ji-hoo squinted his eyes, looking at her in a renewed way. Actually, I wanted to hear what you had on your mind. Honestly, I want to learn magic properly. Yuri mumbled.
But I don't think that's going to be easy given the circumstances.
So I thought it'd be better to do as I was told. Sol Jihu was elated to hear that. He was worried that Un Yuri might not be interested in magic, but from the looks of it, he had been worried for nothing.
Everything seemed to be working out for the better, but it wasn't just mana that Un Yuri had to train.
Stamina is everything.
Un Yuri was expected to raise her physical abilities by making the most of the opportunities available only in the neutral zone.
Sol Jihu had already devised a master plan, called Operation Princess Maker. He waited for Un Yuri to finish her meal and took her to the VIP store.
He handed the guide's note to Maria, who worked as the store's clerk, and purchased all 60 bottles of the special competence.
And then he gathered Un Yuri, Park Wuri, and Yu Yolmu in the plaza and introduced a man to the trio. The man was none other than the best trainer in all of Paradise. Pleased to make your acquaintance. My name is Jang Maldong.
Jang Maldong spoke solemnly, waving his cane back and forth slightly.
Park Wuri and Yu Yolmu clearly seemed nervous.
Their bodies were rigid with tension. Jang Maldong carefully scanned the three.
Suddenly, his eyes twinkled.
You seem to have quite a body.
Are you an athlete? He was referring to Un Yuri. I'm especially impressed with your flexibility and resilience. Yes. As I thought.
A body like yours can't be made overnight.
It is the fruit of restless training from a young age. My guess is either rhythmic gymnastics or practical dance. No, but your standing posture is upright. So it has to be either ballet or modern dance. Un Yuri nodded lightly.
Sol Jihu was simply astonished by Jang Maldong's insight. He had figured out Un Yuri's major just by looking at the shape of her body.
And you? Your method is a bit tactless, but I can tell you've been working out. Yu Yolmu gave a shy grin. Park Wuri appeared to be looking forward to his turn.
But Jang Maldong glanced once and then walked past Park Wuri, clicking his tongue and shaking his head without a word.
I will make it short.
Upon finishing the inspection, Jang Maldong said,
I'm never the one to interfere with other people's decisions.
I came here at the request of Representative Sol. But if possible, I'd like to devote my time to something more valuable.
Walk away if you want. I won't stop you. That was what he was trying to say. I'll warn you now. My training will be very difficult, and I have no plans to force you into it. If you're not up for a challenge, I recommend you leave now. Park Wuri and Yu Yolmu shouted out to express their enthusiasm. They didn't need to hear more.
They came here not by force but by choice.
And frankly, they couldn't pass up the opportunity to learn from Jang Maldong, a trainer many Earthlings dreamed of having.
That's probably what they're thinking right now.
Sol Jihu smiled bitterly as he watched Jang Maldong take the trio to the notice board.
Agnes, Kazuki, Marcel Guionia, and even Sol Jihu himself had broken into tears. The infamous training regimen that made every single famed Earthling in Paradise cry without exception. Sol Jihu wondered, how long will those three last against that?
His question was answered by evening. Towards the end of the training, Sol Jihu headed back to the plaza only to be greeted by loud weeping. With a haggard, worn-out appearance, Park Wuri sat bawling like a baby. The same went for Yu Yolmu. The burly man was sniffing with tears in his eyes. He wasn't as loud as Park Wuri, but Sol Jihu could see his lips tremble. And Un Yuri was.
She's not here? Where did she go? Back to her room, I presume. Jang Maldong said as he watched Yu Yolmu help Park Wuri get up from the ground.
Unlike those two, she trained to the end. So I sent her home early. Surprised to hear that Un Yuri had actually followed through to the end, Sol Jihu asked immediately. How was she? Tenacious.
Jang Maldong made a clear assessment.
She is exceptionally competitive. She came at me persistently as if I really was her enemy. She has a certain air of desperation, though I know nothing about her circumstances.
After that, Sol Ji-hoo hurried to the first ranker's room.
The door was half open. He knocked twice at the door out of courtesy before entering the room. Immediately, his jaws dropped. The room was an absolute mess. All the ornaments around the room and the items she got from the tutorial were mingled together on the floor like trash. Yuri was sprawled out on the floor. Sleepy-eyed, she stared at the ceiling, wiggling her fingers.
Every time her index finger moved, an ornament glided through the air. "What are you doing?"
"Talk." The ornament fell. "Training." Yuri answered softly. "Mana training." Sol Ji-hoo gave a bitter smile. To think she'd drown herself in more training after a day of Jang Maldong's training. He couldn't believe his eyes. "Are you okay? I heard you finished your training regime." "I thought I'd die."
"Then take a break." "My body is resting."
"I'm only moving my mana." Yuri groaned. "I just thought it'd be a waste to not take advantage of the special competence until the end." "I see." As a fellow training maniac, Sol Ji-hoo understood what she was trying to say.
With training efficiency soaring 8 times the normal rate, it would be wasteful not to train to the end. You should at least do it in bed. That way you'll get more rest.
"I was going to, but I collapsed on my way there." "I'm sorry, but could you move me there?" Sol Ji-hoo, smiling blandly, lifted Yuri up and dropped her off on the bed.
Now seemed like a good time.
Sol Ji-hoo watched Yuri struggling to settle into bed before finally speaking again. "Miss Yuri."
What if I told you there's a way to study magic while sleeping? Yuri did not answer.
The look on her face told Sol Ji-hoo that she was clearly confused.
"I can tell you're very serious about this." Sol Ji-hoo continued casually.
"If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right, no?" He took something out of his pocket. It was a link that bore the mana of the pendant, just like the hairpin he gave to Charlotte Arya. "You said back at the cafeteria that you're serious about learning magic." Yuri's eyes twinkled.
"Do you know a good teacher?"
Even her voice sounded lively again.
"Not in the neutral zone, but there's a way you can meet her."
Yuri's eyebrows wriggled. With a faint smile, Sol Ji-hoo gently pulled Yuri's left hand. He didn't bother explaining in detail.
"That would be Russell's job. Just think of this as a reward for completing Master Jang's hellish training."
"A reward just for you, Miss Yuri."
"Just for me."
At that moment, Yuri opened her eyes wide, startled. She even flinched a little bit.
Hold on."
"Shush. Stay still." "Wait. What are you?" Startled by Sol Ji-hoo's unexpected movement, Yuri hurriedly attempted to twist her arms.
However, being completely drained of energy from the intense training, her fatigued body did not move as she wished, causing her to be caught in Sol Ji-hoo's hands.
Sol Ji-hoo's lips curled up into a mischievous grin.
"Geez, why are you resisting so much? It's a gift, you know?"
Yuri glared at the chuckling Sol Ji-hoo, but she could only dumbfoundedly stare as a ring was slipped onto her finger. "It's all done now. Congratulations." Sol Ji-hoo patted the back of Yuri's hand.
She had a rare, perplexed expression as she stared at the silver ring on her finger. Sure, giving a ring as a present was fine and all, but her face said she could not, for the love of God, understand why it had to be her left hand, and why he had to personally put the ring on the ring finger of her left hand.
"You worked hard.
Get some rest now."
Yuri glared at Sol Ji-hoo with narrowed eyes, but Sol Ji-hoo paid no heed to it. Instead, he even winked at her.
"Oh right, don't be too surprised.
There might be another person there, but she's a queen, so don't be too disrespectful." Leaving behind words she didn't understand, Sol Ji-hoo walked out, waving his hand. Yuri stared at her left ring finger for a long time before shaking her head. She then let out a long sigh before quietly closing her eyes. And when she opened her eyes again, a new world was spread out in front of her. "Welcome.
Come here. Hurry up and come."
With two girls wearing pointed hats welcoming her with outstretched arms. Asterisk. The next day. Sol Ji-hoo's predictions were spot on. Eun Yuri paid him a visit as soon as morning arrived. She didn't make a fuss as Charlotte Arya did,
but he could guess what she was feeling from her glowing face. The emotions of joy and excitement which she hadn't shown during the tutorial were exuding from her. How was it?
It was incredible.
As if the surprise of experiencing a new world hadn't faded yet, Eun Yuri replied with rushed breathing.
Something like that.
It was the first time I experienced anything like it.
Well, it's definitely not something you can experience easily. It still feels like a dream.
Can you imagine? Borrowing the power of the universe's source to make the human spirit flow into an arbitrary closed system isolated from the middle world with no external force acting upon it in the form of a dream, causing the direction of entropy to.
She excitedly rattled on incomprehensible sentences. No.
As an engineering student, he was able to understand a portion of what she was saying, but Sol Ji-hoo could not understand why the second law of thermodynamics was suddenly mentioned.
He covered her restlessly blabbering mouth with his hand before asking another question.
Did you meet Lady Russell?
Eun Yuri MMPHED. Ah, sorry.
Yes, and I also made a friend. A friend?
Ah, Tilda, that's great.
To be already friends with the Queen.
You must feel good. Of course. But above all, to finally have a teacher. She must really like them. Sol Ji-hoo gave a satisfied laugh inside as he saw Eun Yuri talking more than usual. Was this how Cao Cao felt as he looked at the overjoyed Guan Yu when he received the red hair?
I told you that I would help you properly. Sol Ji-hoo brightly smiled.
Work hard. Our promise is important, but it's not like we won't see each other after the neutral zone.
You'll stick with us from now on out, won't you?
Eun Yuri suddenly fell silent at those words. She then carefully asked him, "Can I?" Sol Ji-hoo blinked his eyes. Eun Yuri asked him a second time,
"Can I really follow you after we get out of the neutral zone?"
"Of course." Sol Ji-hoo remarked awkwardly.
"Why?
Were you planning to go somewhere else when the neutral zone closes?" "No. Definitely not." Eun Yuri vehemently denied it. "That's a relief.
I'm not lying.
No one's tampered with me." "Well, it's fine even if it happened." Sol Ji-hoo grinned when he saw Eun Yuri protesting while feeling wronged. "I'm not one to just look when someone takes what's mine. I'm more of the type to do the taking." In any case, don't worry about anything and just follow me."
As he said that, Eun Yuri rapidly shifted her eyes, not knowing where to look before replying in a small voice.
"Yes." He didn't understand why she was smiling shyly. Sol Ji-hoo grew curious about why she suddenly was acting like that, but he still continued his words. "In any case, let's go with this routine for a month. Physical training in the neutral zone and magic training in your sleep. It's a rigorous schedule, but it shouldn't be too impossible with the first ranker's room." "Of course.
You don't have to worry."
Eun Yuri clasped her hands and gave a faint smile. "You've already set everything up for me. I'll work really hard and become someone useful to you."
They were truly commendable words, so Sol Ji-hoo felt pleased inside and cheered her on.
"All right. Do your best for today's training." "Yes." Eun Yuri loudly shouted before turning around. She walked out with joyful steps before abruptly pausing. Turning only her head around, she said, "Thank you, Oppa." Sol Ji-hoo blinked his eyes.
"Just now. What did she say?"
"You're almost like a god, Oppa."
"A god?"
"Yes. A god." Eun Yuri's eyes curved prettily like crescent moons.
"Because you grant my wishes."
With that, she ran out as if she was escaping. Sol Jihu, who was now alone, scratched his head.
He couldn't figure out why she acted like that, nor did he understand the meaning behind her last sentence.
Asterisk. Time flew by in a breeze, and a month passed. The day the awakening chamber opened finally came. To Earthlings, their class would determine their value.
Perhaps it was because of this that the people lined up under the supervision of the instructors all had nervous faces.
Sol Jihu leaned against the stairway, carefully observing the people coming out of the awakening chamber, one by one. The majority did not take more than 1 or 2 minutes. Looking with his general observation, most were warriors like he had expected, with a few archers here and there.
There wasn't a single person that had awakened as a magician or a priest despite the large number of people.
Yu Yolmu is a warrior and Park Wuri is an archer. Then, at long last, Un Yuri entered the awakening chamber. Sol Jihu intently stared at the pure white door.
Though he didn't feel completely relaxed, he thought from experience that it was highly likely for Un Yuri to take a long time inside.
However, the door swung open in less than 2 minutes of Un Yuri going in. Hawk! He heard her heavy panting. Un Yuri staggered out of the door with her hair drenched in sweat.
Already? The moment he activated his 9 eyes, Sol Jihu's pupils dilated.
Violet. Un Yuri's body was bathed in a clear violet color, stellar evolution. But she was green during the tutorial. The color had changed into violet in the span of 1 month.
Sol Jihu's eyes narrowed. Is this the second? No, the third time?
However, before he could even finish the thought, pat! A vision unfolded before his eyes. Sol Jihu focused his gaze on the scene. He saw an unfamiliar woman in the center of the vision. Sol Jihu needed a few moments to realize that this woman was actually Un Yuri. Her face and the air about her looked more mature, and her outfit was completely different. Most importantly, she had an extremely angered expression.
This is something that absolutely must be done. She must be talking to someone judging by how she was glaring and shouting in a certain direction. The moment the spirit realm falls, Tiggle Fortress is done for.
And if Tiggle Fortress falls, it's the end for the Federation. And if the Federation falls, humanity perishes. A husky voice finished her sentence.
Sol Jihu couldn't see the owner of the voice in the vision, but he definitely heard it.
Sol Jihu subconsciously touched his neck with his hand. I get what you're saying, but… The unidentified voice continued in a low voice. What of it? What do you expect me to do? In the vision, Un Yuri's face twisted in anger. Aren't you in a cooperative partnership with the Federation? Let's just say it's closer to a deal than cooperation. Well, they did treat me better than humanity.
What are you saying? Does it matter if it's a deal or cooperation in this situation?
Enough.
The individual who was presumed to be a male cut off Un Yuri's words.
All right. Well, fine.
Assuming everything you say is out of good intentions, what I want to know is why you're saying this to me.
What about the force of Earthlings that you humanity were so proud of? I don't think the Parasite Queen will stay still. Un Yuri continued speaking. It's obvious that at least 2 or 3 commanders will be mobilized.
That's why we need your help in saving the spirit realm.
There's no one who knows the commanders better than you. Aha!
So you chase me out when you don't need me and beg for help when you need me.
Un Yuri shut her mouth at his sarcastic remark. Amazing, really.
This doesn't apply to you, but sometimes, the fact that I'm from the same race as the rest of humanity makes me want to puke.
Un Yuri could only part her innocent lips, wondering if the man was arguing with her on purpose.
That's not all.
It's been ages since the world tree withered away. What difference does it make in saving the spirit realm now? Rather, do you even have a way to cross over to the spirit realm in the first place? You should know that there is another way to get to the spirit realm apart from going through the world tree.
Are you mad?
If you're talking about the spring, don't even mention it. Are you running your mouth off because you don't know the military strength needed to ward off a single commander? I know that the method of using the spring is limited.
But if we unite with the remaining forces of the spirit realm, we might just be able to.
Yuri trailed off as if she herself thought that their chance of success was remote. A snort was heard. Jesus. I agreed to meet you because of your fame, but it turns out you're a hopeless fool like the rest of them. Did you ask to meet me only because of a meaningless sense of duty to do something? Opening square bracket dot ellipsis closing square bracket. What a waste of time. Fuck off. No, I'll fuck off instead.
The man's footsteps gradually grew fainter following the sound of him clicking his tongue.
Yuri bit her lower lip before shouting. Let's make a deal. Opening square bracket question mark closing square bracket. I said let's make a deal. With me.
What? Do you even know what I want?
The thing you want. No, the thing you hope to accomplish.
I know what it is.
Yuri gulped before saying with a resolute face. I have a method to save the sacred empress.
This method is much more reliable than the method you, spear demon, plan on using.
In the next moment, Yuri's eyes widened in the vision. Sol Jihu,
who was watching the vision, also shot his eyes open.
It was because a spear's blade was held against her neck before he even blinked once. Speak. And in the vision, he saw a familiar back. As Yuri said, it was his past future self. I sincerely hope that it isn't some nonsense. I really don't want to kill the magician who's touted as one of humanity's last hope with my own hands. And Yuri.
Oppa? Suddenly walked out of the screen.
At the same time, the vision disappeared like it never existed.
You're so mean.
I asked you to help me.
A softly grumbling Yuri was taking deep breaths while wiping her forehead that was drenched in sweat.
Sol Jihu looked down at the panting Yuri with dazed eyes.
It wasn't once or twice that he had seen visions, but his head felt complicated after receiving so much information. However, Sol Jihu was sure about one thing. His prediction was correct.
Humanity's last hope.
In the alternate future, Yuri had been one of humanity's important figures who fought against the parasites to the very end. Her status window came into his sight at last.
Yuri's status window. 1. General information.
Summon date, 2018.
03. 22. Marking grade, gold. Sex, age, female, 22. Height, weight, 168.4 centimeters, 52.2 kilograms. Current condition, healthy.
Class, LV1.
Magician. Nationality, Republic of Korea, Area 1. Affiliation. Alias, first place. 2. Traits. 1. Temperament. Avoidant. Tries to avoid things she dislikes or is unwilling to do. Cool-headed. Her thoughts and actions are not swayed by emotions, always calm. Competitive, determined to win. Ambitious, claims, enjoys, or covets things she feels she is missing. Dependent, subconsciously seeks someone to depend on. 2. Aptitude. Observative. Will carefully analyze and study items and events all around her. Immersive. Devotes her whole attention in whatever she does. Imaginative. Has the power to mentally draw phenomena or items without personal experience. Creative. The ability to think of new things. Genius. Heavenly talent. Naturally born with exceptional talent in a certain field. Projection. The ability to manipulate items or phenomena inside one's mind. 3. Physical level. Strength, low, intermediate, up pointing arrow 1. Endurance, low, low, up pointing arrow 1. Agility, intermediate, low. Stamina, intermediate, intermediate. Mana, intermediate, intermediate. Luck, high, high. Remaining ability points, 1. Sol Jihu became speechless after seeing her information that filled the air in front of him. Just why was there so much? Her physical level. Her basic physical level was so high it was surprising. It wasn't unbelievable since she said she received systematic training for more than 10 years since childhood. What grabbed his attention was her aptitude. He finally understood Russell's words.
From observative to projection, each of her aptitudes made her perfectly fit to be a magician.
No, they would also be fitting for any of the other classes,
but they suited a magician the best. They said I'm a magician.
Yuri spoke with a relaxed face as if she finally felt better. It didn't take very long. The 7 gods unanimously told me to be a magician.
Sol Jihu sank into thought while he looked at Yuri, who was cheerily talking.
Just what kind of relationship did his past future self have with Yuri? And what was that talk about a method to save the sacred empress? And what was the spring they mentioned? Unaware of what Sol Jihu was feeling inside, Yuri chattered on with a beaming smile on her face. But I don't plan on being a magician.
Sol Jihu furrowed his brows.
What was this about? Teacher explained that magic is categorized into 3 branches.
3 branches?
Yes. The first is sorcery, an art that borrows power from supernatural beings or mysterious powers to replace formulas with spells to control the flow of mana. The second is magic, an art that materializes mana through fixed laws according to a standardized system. The final one is pioneering your own road, creating your own path of mana. Yuri looked up at Sol Jihu. I plan to become a mage and tread my own path of mana. In other words, she wasn't saying she would choose another class, but instead, specialize in one of the 3 branches of magic.
But Lady Russell is the founder of sorcery. Didn't she say anything?
Not at all. In fact, she was very happy with my decision. Yuri shook her head.
She said, while it depends on the person, those who walk on the way of mana need to know how to pioneer and develop their own unique realms. Sol Jihu gaped his mouth. He felt like he had heard something similar before.
A unique realm.
Won't it be hard?
Probably. Teacher said so too.
That each step will be excruciating and that I will probably clash against her a lot in the future. Yet the person that was talking did not have a trace of fear on her face.
Still. Yuri gently spread all 10 of her fingers. Streaks of blue light extended out from her fingertips and entangled with each other to form a neat hexagram.
The beautiful yet fantastical melody of mana gave Sol Jihu goosebumps.
Yuri smiled with dreamy eyes, looking at the brightly shining star she created. My heart is pounding in excitement. The awakening of all the individuals inside the neutral zone ended. Some changes were made to Yuri's training regime after her class was determined. She couldn't just train all day since she had things to accomplish in the neutral zone. From now on, she had to start doing missions for the sake of building experience.
As such, Yuri was introduced by Kim Hana to a team of 6 people, which included the one and only priest who awakened this time.
It was needless to say, of course, that Park Wuri and Yu Yolmu were among them. Missions in the morning, physical training in the afternoon, and mana training during sleep. It wouldn't have been strange for her to complain at this point, but Yuri didn't utter a single word in objection. On the contrary, the smiles that were rarely seen on her face before became more common by the day, making it seem as if she was growing livelier each day. She even separately requested Sol Jihu to help her train.
Oppa, can you help me with training? Training?
Sol Jihu asked back while he gazed down. For reference, the two were in the middle of eating at a restaurant. What are you talking about when we're in the middle of a meal? Please. There's this homework that teacher assigned me to do, and I don't have enough time.
Even so. Master Zhang Maldong upped my training intensity recently, so it's obvious that I'll be knocked out the moment the evening training ends.
I need to make use of any spare time before that. Yuri repeatedly pleaded with him, saying that Russell would severely punish her if she couldn't follow the pace of her lessons. Sol Jihu, unable to ignore her plea, let out a sigh and nodded.
How do you want me to help you?
It's nothing hard. Eun Yuri held out the spoon she was holding to Sol Ji-hoo. "Please feed me."
Sol Ji-hoo doubted his ears.
She wanted him to do what? "You just have to feed me and talk to me about different things."
He wasn't sure whether she was asking him out on a date or whether she wanted him to help her train. Sol Ji-hoo stared at her with a serious face.
"Miss Eun Yuri." He was suspicious no matter how he thought about it, so he had to ask.
"By any chance, do you like me?"
"What?" Eun Yuri leapt up.
"What are you saying?
"Aren't you the one who likes me instead?"
As she frantically waved the ring sitting on her left ring finger, Seo Yu-hui, who happened to pass by at that moment, suddenly stopped in her steps.
"Ni! Come quickly."
Another order just came in. Phi Sora, who was in the kitchen slicing slabs of meat, shouted in a loud voice, but Seo Yu-hui stood in place, holding a tray full of empty plates while rapidly looking back and forth between the two.
"What do you mean? Anyway, hurry up. I don't have much time. Come on." Eun Yuri urged him on and opened her mouth as she said, "Ah. Piek."
As she did that, Little Chick suddenly appeared from who knows where and stood next to her while opening its beak. "Hey! Where did you come from?"
"Ah. Damn it. Fine.
Let me ask first though."
Sol Ji-hoo felt his head become dizzy as he grabbed a spoon in each hand.
"Just what training are you doing?"
he asked while feeding a baby kitten and a baby chick.
"It's called Ricel Recital, an important ability that I'm learning."
Eun Yuri replied while chewing.
"Ricel Recital?"
"Yes. It's one of teacher's signature ultimate moves." Okay, but what does learning that move have to do with me feeding you?"
"Because that way, I'll be able to use both my hands." As Eun Yuri explained, she had been busy moving all 10 fingers while holding her hands in the air ever since she passed over her spoon. One finger flicked up and down while another drew a circle in the air before making a dot. "What are you doing?"
"Practicing mudras." 1. Eun Yuri swallowed her food. In the past, more specifically, during the reign of the Empire, there were 2 major methods that magicians used to materialize mana. One was chanting a spell using their mouths. The other was signing mudras with their hands. She opened her mouth again. Sol Ji-hoo attentively listened as he mechanically fed her. So in theory, it becomes possible to simultaneously cast 3 spells at once. Of course, it's only under the condition that you can chant a spell while casting separate mudras with each hand. As Eun Yuri quickly explained, Sol Ji-hoo was shocked. "That's possible?" "It's difficult. Not only do you need to do 3 things at the same time, but you also have to split and operate your mana circuit into 3 separate branches." Eun Yuri diligently chewed while zealously moving her fingers and continuing to explain. For the record, there was no one besides teacher who could pull it off in her era. Triple casting had only been possible in theory, but she accomplished it. That's why it's been coined the name Ricel Recital. Now that he thought about it, chanting a spell would sound like singing while the movement of all 10 fingers would look like playing the keys on a piano. A harmonic trio played by the mouth and 2 hands. I guess that's why it's called a recital. Teacher said that I have to be able to automatically sign mudras without thinking in order to learn this technique. That's why I asked you to talk to me. Eun Yuri cried out in the middle of speaking. "Ow!" She grabbed her hair in frustration. It seemed that she made a mistake while signing her mudras. Take it easy. It doesn't seem easy." "No." Eun Yuri spoke while being chagrined. "There's no way I can only do this much when I have such a great teacher and am drinking the special competence potions." She went so far as to grind her teeth while declaring she would register the ability in her status window within a week, muttering that it was now a matter of pride. Sol Ji-hoo was worried for her as he almost saw a hint of madness in her. Will she be okay? While it was good for her to be so motivated, the consequences would be more severe if she failed. However, Sol Ji-hoo's worry turned into shock a week later. It was because 4.
Abilities
2. Class abilities 0. 3. Other abilities 2. Recel recital lowest. Mana circuit application intermediate. Yuri had really upheld her promise. Although it was of the lowest rank, she had gone beyond just having a feel for it to succeeding in learning the ability by herself.
However, her acquisition of Recel recital was just the beginning.
2. Class abilities 1. Path of mana lowest. 3. Other abilities 2. Recel recital lowest. Mana circuit application intermediate, high.
In the 6th week.
2. Class abilities 2. High-speed chanting lowest. Path of mana lowest. 3. Other abilities 3. Recel recital lowest. Mana circuit application high.
Final solo lowest.
In the 7th week. 2. Class abilities 3. High-speed chanting low. Path of mana low. Incomplete truth lowest. 3. Other abilities 3. Rosel's recital lowest. Mana circuit application highest.
Final solo lowest. And finally, in the 8th week. At the end of each week, Yuri appeared before him with higher skill masteries and new abilities.
Sol Ji-hoo sat in the head manager's room with his eyes fixated on the screen. Nowadays, he spent most of his time observing Yuri.
Like a seedling breaking through the soil to greet the warm sunlight before eventually blooming into gorgeous flower buds, the scene where a person's talents were blooming after being supported by her own efforts and the right environment couldn't be more beautiful.
Amazing. Yuri, who was immersed in training, not wasting even a second under her firm conviction of walking her own path, looked truly amazing. He was almost jealous.
Perhaps it was because of this that Sol Ji-hoo could not take his eyes off of her for a while.
And while he was absent-mindedly staring at her.
As you might have already experienced, paradise attracts all sorts of people. He suddenly recalled Jang Maldong's words.
You can tell just by what goes on in the neutral zone. Among the dozens of newbies, there are always one or two special ones. The so-called gifted ones. But the funny thing is, there are differences even among the gifted ones. The one who's more talented, the one who's more special.
You can go on, and eventually, you'll find someone who's unrivaled among the gifted.
People like that will go above learning skills on their own and will tread their own paths. They will enter unique realms no one else has ever reached. I call that enlightenment.
That was right. Yuri was a genius. She was a genius among geniuses where magic was concerned. Not to mention that she was a hard-working genius. With the addition of nutrients called special competences that increased training efficiency by 8 times and fertile land in the form of a wonderful teacher, she was growing at a tremendous rate every day.
No, she wasn't just growing. Yuri was already treading her own unique realm called the incomplete truth.
She had already taken a step into a realm that most people could not conceive no matter how much they tried. Is it supposed to be hard?
She had said so as if this much was only normal, like eating rice. When he thought this,
a flame lit up inside him. His face felt surprisingly hot when Sol Ji-hoo subconsciously felt his cheek with his palm.
It was as if a massive lump of fire was blazing in his body. He knew it wasn't a bad sign. He even knew it was something to be congratulated for. Right, he knew. He knew, but childish emotions that couldn't be said aloud kept threatening to erupt from inside him like boiling magma. He had toiled a little hard as a representative. He had worked a little harder during the tutorial.
Just what have I been doing?
He felt ashamed of himself for being determined to rest during the neutral zone. Sol Ji-hoo stared at Yuri with burning eyes before clenching his teeth. Trait, competitiveness, has been created.
Sol Ji-hoo jumped out of his chair and the next moment,
he tightly clenched onto the spear of purity and a long sword that was lying around before exiting the administrator's room. Back then, Sol Ji-hoo headed for the training room while trying to remember his battle with the homunculus. He had clearly felt at that time the feeling of his body moving separately when he fought with the unfamiliar machete and his fists and legs. I'm certain. And the feeling of everything becoming one as soon as he grabbed the spear of purity. Ehu. This is killing me. Phi Sora cracked her neck left and right while walking towards the training room. In the neutral zone, she acted as the cafeteria assistant. To be more precise, she assisted Seo Yuhui, who was in charge of the restaurant. Since the restaurant had to serve almost 400 people, it was at a level that Seo Yuhui couldn't manage alone, so Phi Sora worked there part-time as an assistant. While it was decent for steadily earning a bit of survival points, she felt sore from being holed up in the kitchen preparing food ingredients. This was why she came to the training room to stretch her body. However, Phi Sora stopped in her tracks when she finally arrived at the training room. There was someone already there. Sol Ji-hoo was heavily swinging a weapon. What's he doing here? Phi Sora tilted her head before jumping internally in a startle. Sol Ji-hoo's face was strange. His usual smiling face had disappeared to God knows where and was replaced by a menacing glare. The way he was crazily swinging his weapon, it was as if he was going to eat someone alive. Again, there it is again. From her long experience with him, Phi Sora immediately noticed what kind of condition Sol Ji-hoo was in. He was in what Phi Sora had named, dual personality mode. She didn't know who provoked him this time, but his switch was completely flipped. That wasn't all. Oh! Phi Sora mentally screamed after confirming the weapon Sol Ji-hoo was using. Gone was his spear and instead, a long sword was in his hands. What's wrong with him all of a sudden? No matter how she looked at him, there weren't just one or two strange points. Judging that another incident like Eva's night might happen again, Phi Sora ran out to inform a person of this matter. Meanwhile, Sol Ji-hoo was so focused that he was unaware of anyone's presence. He suddenly flung away the sword he had been swinging for a long time before grabbing his spear and unleashing his spear arts in full force. And he repeated this process indefinitely. How much time had passed? Just as his breath had gradually quickened and his sweat began pouring like rain, Sol Ji-hoo stopped his actions. Fu. As he was steadying his breath. Oh ho! A long sword, huh? He suddenly heard a familiar voice in his ears. When he looked around, he found Zhang Maldong leaning against the door with a subtle smile on his face. Master. I don't think you're trying to switch class to a swordsman after all this time. Certainly. Grabbing your main weapon after using an unfamiliar weapon does make it feel a little more familiar. Just like how you feel happier when you meet a close friend after only being with your everyday friends. Zhang Maldong twirled his cane in a circle. Well, I don't know if it's a placebo effect or not, but, in any case, are you trying to achieve harmonization of the mind, technique, and body using this method? When Sol Ji-hoo was about to lower his weapon after being discouraged by his questioning tone, Zhang Maldong raised his brows. Why are you lowering your arm? I only asked. I never said that your method was wrong. At those words, Sol Ji-hoo tightened his grip again on his spear. Yes. Try whatever you can. What's important to you right now is getting new experiences. In that respect, it's not bad to try anything, even if it ends up being a fruitless struggle. Zhang Maldong continued with a slight smile. If I had to give you another piece of advice, it'd be better to do shadow training rather than to aimlessly swing your weapon around. Shadow training? Didn't I tell you before? That training is a battle. Yes. Try to carefully recall the situation at the time. The feeling won't easily come to you when you're being conscious of it. Won't you feel happier if you met a friend who you haven't seen for a long time without knowing in advance? At those words, Sol Jihu's eyes lit up in understanding. 1. Mudras are seals or signs usually performed using hands.
It is used in a wide scope such as religion, dance, yoga, and even meditation.
If interested in more info, please read the Wikipedia article. You're right. Aren't I?
Zhang Maldong grinned before waving his cane around.
Take it slow. Eat at the right times and get a lot of sleep. What you need to do right now isn't building up your stamina but controlling your mind and looking inside your subconscious psyche.
There is a reason mind comes first in mind, technique, and body.
A healthy mind develops a healthy body.
Remembering the old adage that admonishes to make haste slowly, Sol Jihu bowed.
Thank you. No need.
If possible, try to train elsewhere.
The neutral zone is a place for the newbies to train.
Because of you, other people have been too scared to use the facility.
Though Zhang Maldong said this jokingly,
this was indeed a mistake on Sol Jihu's part.
Realizing it now, Sol Jihu went, Sorry, I'll find another place. Sol Jihu respectfully bid goodbye and left the training room. Since the head manager's room was huge, he planned to train there. It was around then that Eun Yuri came to the training room in her tracksuit. Her morning missions had actually ended early, so she asked Zhang Maldong for personal training. She had only run into Sol Jihu by coincidence. Oppa! She called out to him, but Sol Jihu breezed past her. Eun Yuri gave a shocked expression as she stood frozen in a daze. For some reason, he was giving off a hard-to-approach air today.
Don't mind it so much.
Zhang Maldong chuckled. He becomes blind once he puts his mind to training. He might look fine on the outside, but a fire must be raging inside him.
Fire?
Eun Yuri looked confused, but Zhang Maldong understood this well. A human's willpower wasn't infinite. No matter what someone did, they would get tired over time unless tangible results could be seen. This was the state Sol Jihu had been in recently. It wasn't that his desire to improve disappeared. He also had been training on a regular basis. But because his talent was extremely ordinary for the giant wall blocking his path, he couldn't help but get exhausted. This was when Eun Yuri appeared.
The emergence of an overwhelming genius shocked Sol Jihu greatly and resulted in lighting up the internal spark that was slowly flickering off. This was easy to see just by looking at Sol Jihu's back as he left. Drenched in sweat, he was radiating heat from his body. The existence of a rival is a good stimulant for growth. Zhang Maldong rubbed his chin and stared at Eun Yuri in satisfaction.
Eun Yuri, who was glancing at Sol Jihu with a somewhat sullen look, sighed in the next moment. "Oh right, master."
Then, she spoke.
"I'm sorry, but can you finish today's personal training before noon?"
"It doesn't matter with me, but didn't you say you'd train until 1?
"That was the plan, but I have a sudden meeting to attend to. Team leader said we should eat lunch together and talk about potentially changing the missions we're taking."
"Team leader?" Zhang Maldong tilted his head.
"I thought you were the leader, Miss Eun Yuri." No, it's not me.
There's a priest in the team.
She's the leader," Eun Yuri said while shaking her head. "I could have taken the role, but I conceded it."
"I'm still refusing it to this day."
Is there a reason? Taking on the position of a leader can be a good experience."
"That's true, but I don't like it." "She doesn't like it?" Zhang Maldong was a little surprised at these unexpected words.
Feeling that she was avoiding it, he asked,
"If it is okay with you, I'd like to hear why." "Well, it's just my personality. I want to do what I enjoy doing.
I won't feel comfortable if people around me start depending on me on their own." Eun Yuri lowered her head a little and murmured quietly,
"And excessive dependence can get a little scary."
Zhang Maldong observed Eun Yuri with keen eyes as she fiddled with her fingers.
It went without saying that different people had different personalities.
While some preferred to stand in the front and lead others, there were also those who preferred to stay back and follow others led. For example, Sol Jihu was a general. Although his rank was equivalent to the commander-in-chief, he was a vanguard who directly led his subordinates and charged forth, rather than staying in the rear and giving commands. However, war wasn't fought with just generals. Although the organization had a peerless administrator like Kim Hana, strictly speaking, she was a non-combatant. She could not fight in wars and would not be of much help either.
That was why they needed someone who could follow him to the battlefield, a tactician who could strategize and grasp the overall picture so that Sol Jihu would not have to look back while charging forward.
Looks like I can be a bit more relaxed.
Though, it'll depend on how she develops. Jang Maldong grinned.
He had hopes that Un Yuri would come to fulfill this role.
Sol Jihu quit all activities after that day. Now that Un Yuri was doing well on her own, he stopped paying attention to her.
2 months had already gone by since the start of the neutral zone. Sol Jihu began to stay cooped up in his room training alone.
His daily routine changed completely. He woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, just like Un Yuri, and trained until midnight without rest.
He was shadow training in his head even when he was taking showers, and he continuously used mana even as he ate. Once midnight hit, he would leave the room and head to the training room.
As not many people used the training room at this hour, he could use the facility's equipment to his heart's content.
Sol Jihu truly trained like a madman. If there was one thing that was different than the past, it was that he no longer cared about the result. Instead, he had belief. Even if his efforts did not bear fruition immediately, he decided that it would be a process of growth.
He did not doubt that these processes would build up and eventually come back to him as result. As he devoted his entire time and effort into training, the jealousy he had for Un Yuri began to grow faint.
No, in truth, he still smiled bitterly whenever Un Yuri came by and talked about the things she learned that day. Whenever he saw her status window, he became keenly aware of the difference in their talents and got depressed.
However, Sol Jihu did not envy Un Yuri more than he needed to.
In fact, he simply accepted it.
As someone once said, it was foolish to resent someone for their inborn talent. Rather, one should try to take one step every day for 10, 20 years.
Then one day, they would meet the person they always wanted to become. Sol Jihu ruminated on these words whenever he had negative thoughts, spurring his training efforts even further. Once he did, a new competitor came into the picture. It wasn't Un Yuri, but himself. Before he noticed, Sol Jihu had started a fight with himself.
Indescribable sorrow flooded in whenever he saw his status window that was at a standstill, but that only made him grit his teeth and thrust his spear once more.
The moment he gave up would be the moment he lost. Not to someone else, but himself. When he thought this, he could not give up. And thus, whenever he endured these things, he felt himself grow stronger. It was a mysterious thing. Although there was no tangible result that his eyes could see, he was feeling something inside him harden. Just like how a genius had their own path, an ordinary person had their own path. Sol Jihu's talent was average. This fact could not be changed. In that case, there was only one thing he could do. Try harder. To endeavor to make up for this lack of talent. More. As Sol Jihu dodged the homunculus attacks in the world of his imagination, droplets of sweat fell from his hair, shining like starlight. Sol Jihu trained until 2 a.m. today just like always, then headed to the cafeteria. Once he entered the kitchen, just as expected.
"You're here?"
Seo Yuhui was waiting with the cooking ingredients all prepped up. "Yes, Nuna." Sol Jihu smiled awkwardly, feeling apologetic. There was only one reason Seo Yuhui was up at this time waiting at the cafeteria, to make a meal for Sol Jihu. Anyone would feel hungry after an arduous training session.
Sol Ji-hoo had been sneaking into the kitchen every night to steal food but was caught by Seo Yu-hui one morning when she came to prepare for the next day. Seo Yu-hui was sorry to see the head manager and representative sneaking away food like some sort of a criminal, and thus she personally came to serve him late-night meals.
Eat this and wait. I'll prepare the food soon. Putting out a basket filled with herbs and meat sandwiches, Seo Yu-hui smiled brightly and got up from her seat. Sol Ji-hoo was impressed as he saw a kitchen counter fully prepared with all kinds of ingredients. On the other hand, he couldn't help but feel sorry. It really felt like he was making Seo Yu-hui suffer unnecessarily. Nuna, I can prepare my own food. No, you're going to grab whatever you see again.
Haven't you been getting only 4 hours of sleep to train?
Then you need to eat more nutritious food. Seo Yu-hui spoke kindly while stirring a ladle. Sol Ji-hoo smiled bashfully as he felt the scent of herbs spreading in his mouth. This is great. I'm happy. His expression really seemed happy. Seo Yu-hui smiled as well. Fufu, are you that happy?
How could I not be happy?
You're treating me like a king every day. Ah, you can look forward to tonight's dish in particular. I prepared something special.
Special?
Yep.
You see that clam-like thing on the counter?
Sol Ji-hoo's gaze headed to the counter. Looking at it again, he saw clam-like shellfish with soft-looking shells and a lot of meat. They're called margarita mares. It's a type of shellfish native to paradise. Because their meat is white like milk, they're also called the ocean's pearls. Just like she said, the outer surface of the shellfish was milky white and soft. Furthermore, the shellfish were fattened up nicely and were meaty. Sol Ji-hoo got near them and took a whiff, and a delicate scent wafted into his nose. They'd be perfect even when eaten raw.
Sol Ji-hoo gulped. Can I try them?
Of course, I prepared them for you to eat. Seo Yu-hui replied as she blanched vegetables in boiling water.
Ooh, they look amazing.
Ah, but be careful.
They might look clean from the outside, but the kernel inside them is venomous.
You should never eat them raw, and they should be prepared with herbs that neutralize the poi. Seo Yu-hui flinched and stopped talking. Turning back reflexively, she saw Sol Ji-hoo pulling the top and bottom of a shell apart and taking out the meat inside.
Ji-hoo?
Seo Yu-hui's eyes shot open quickly. As Sol Ji-hoo opened his mouth to drop the meat inside, she yelled in shock. Wait! The poor bloke was about to die. Seo Yu-hui's maternal instinct activated and without a thought. Quote ellipsis exclamation mark question mark quote. She threw herself at Sol Ji-hoo while shouting something.
Rewinding the time to 10 minutes ago, Eun Yuri waited until 2 a.m. without sleeping and then snuck out of her room.
In her hand was a plastic bag. I hope you'll like it. Recently, seeing Sol Ji-hoo had been getting increasingly infrequent. She had heard the reason from Jang Maldong. That it would be difficult to see his face now that he started his personal training. As soon as she heard this, Eun Yuri wanted to help Sol Ji-hoo. She didn't have any motive other than wanting to repay the favor she received. So after long deliberation, she took Jang Maldong's advice and prepared a suitable gift for him. If you want to help him, buy him some competence. Not the special competence. He's not the type to steal something he's given out. He'll be over the moon if you just get him the best competence from the regular store. Because she was beating one mission after the other, it just so happened that she had ample survival points. So after buying as many competence as she could from the regular store, she had snuck out of her room at the time that Sol Ji-hoo's training would end. As she had not seen his face in a while, a part of her wanted to meet and tell him about her recent progress. He's not in the training room. Did he go to the cafeteria already? Eun Yuri moved her steps while looking around. The cafeteria's lights were off. But just as she expected, a bright light was leaking out of the kitchen. Eun Yuri's face lit up. As she was about to enter the kitchen. This is great. I'm happy. Fufu, are you that happy? How could I not be happy? You're treating me like a king every day." Un Yuri suddenly heard two people talking. This voice. Realizing that the voices belonged to Sol Jihu and Seo Yuhui, Un Yuri blinked rapidly. Why were they here? At this time of night, to boot. Are they eating something delicious without telling anyone? Un Yuri tilted her head for a while as questions began to pop up in her head. It was then. J. Jihu? The volume of Seo Yuhui's voice abruptly went up. Wait! Crashing and creaking noises suddenly erupted from the kitchen like the shelves and the kitchen table were shaking. Then. N not RAAAAAW. Seo Yuhui's urgent yell burst out. Hawk. Following that was the sound of Sol Jihu's heavy pants. Un Yuri's steps halted. Shortly afterward. Ha-ah! Ha-ah! Seo Yuhui let out a long moan as if she was spitting out the breath she had been holding in. The frozen Un Yuri steeled her mind and snuck a glance inside. Immediately, her expression stiffened. The kitchen was a mess. They must have been going at it hard because the prepared ingredients were scattered all over the floor. Moreover, although the kitchen counter was blocking her view, she could see Sol Jihu's leg peeking out from the edge of the counter's corner. Wee-oo! And at the place where Sol Jihu was presumed to be lying down. Un Yuri could see Seo Yuhui's shoulders peeking above the counter, her upper body faintly bouncing up and down. Geez, what am I going to do with you? Didn't Nuna tell you to wait a bit longer? Sorry, I got too absorbed. I did it without thinking. You should be more careful. What if there's an accident? Seo Yuhui let a breath loose as her shoulders slumped. Ow. Okay. Let's wipe off first. It's a complete mess. I'll do it. It's my fault. Just stay still, Nuna. Words that were easily misunderstood flowed out. Un Yuri swallowed hard. As the man and woman got up, she quietly turned back. With her cheeks and neck flushed red, she sneakily left the cafeteria. Sol Jihu trained until late at night like usual but flinched when he got to the head manager's room. Are you just going to train until the neutral zone is over? Come talk to me. The name, Miss Foxy, was signed at the bottom of the note in classy handwriting. Sol Jihu broke out into laughter as he opened the door. Now that he thought about it, he hadn't paid attention to anything that was going on in the neutral zone since he started his personal training. Over 10 weeks had gone by since the start of the neutral zone, so there were less than 2 weeks remaining. With the end in sight, there must be things Kim Hana needed to discuss with him. And so, Sol Jihu got a good night's sleep for the first time in a while and left his room rather late next morning. His plan for the day was to talk to Kim Hana and have a look around the neutral zone. After all, he was the representative of the managing organization. The neutral zone was bustling like usual. Due to the high number of entrants, most of the stores were booming. Among them, the regular store was the most eye-catching as many people were gathered there in particular. Sol Ah and Sung Jin are in charge of the regular store. As Sol Jihu broke through the crowd making a circle around the store. Live tilde live. Ah! Live, live, live. He could hear a cheerful singing that sounded like the humming of a skylark. Welcome everyone to the brother and sister store tilde. Sol Jihu almost burst into laughter. Yi Sol Ah was standing in front of the store, touting for business with a lively dance. Hello tilde, nice to meet you tilde, this is the neutral zone's second floor. I am Sung Jin's Nuna tilde Yi Sol Ah. Hopping around left and right, she repeatedly raised and lowered her arms while rattling her hands. Live tilde live. Live with potions. Live with healing water. Looking closely, she had a bottle in each hand. Every time she waved her hands, Sol Jihu could hear the water churn. The way Yi Sol Ah eagerly danced to the rhythm must have come off as cute, as laughter flew out from the crowd. Next, as one of the spectators clapped lightly, the rest started clapping as well. Thank you. Thank you,
Everyone.
I love you.
Yi Sol-ah spread her arms out with a beaming smile. Don't forget to use our brother and sister store a lot.
Of course, she didn't forget to advertise.
Soon, a good chunk of the crowd entered the store and began to look around. The items on display were needed anyway for the missions, and seeing the lively Yi Sol-ah made them want to buy more to help support the cute younger sister-like girl.
Sol Ji-hoo had to admit. He was impressed. Who would have thought she was good at something like this?
His eyes met Yi Sol-ah's as she was wiping off the sweat on her forehead.
She grinned from ear to ear and waved her hand. Hello.
Wow! How do you know that song? 1. My respected Orabeo Nim hello.
Haha. Alright, calm down. Sung Jin is about to die from embarrassment. Let's go, Yi Sol-ah.
Dance with your shoulders. We're a family. Paradise and Valhalla.
Now she was singing a military song.
Even Sol Ji-hoo was starting to get embarrassed.
Okay, you can stop now. But ignoring what he said.
Why can't you understand my heart?
Yi Sol-ah closed her eyes and sang with her hands on top of her heart. Phew.
Yi Sung-jin sighed as he watched his older sister, who was too immersed in her role-playing. Yi Sol-ah was the one singing, but it was Yi Sung-jin who was embarrassed for her sake. Well, at least their business is doing fantastic.
Sol Ji-hoo smiled bitterly, vowing to never let Yi Sol-ah enter the banquet.
He had a feeling she would get too absorbed in stage 1. Going back to the main topic, Kim Hana was in charge of the weapons store right next to the regular store.
She was sitting with her legs crossed when she saw Sol Ji-hoo coming in and got up. Representative Sol. You're here. She used polite speech, perhaps judging that this was in public. Sol Ji-hoo spoke as he looked around the dozen or so people checking out the store's weapons.
Should I have come later? No, it's fine. We have a lot of part-time workers. Now that she mentioned it, the weapons store had a good number of instructors in it. With so many of them here, you can't be getting that many survival points, right?
Foo-foo, that's not true.
Kim Hana put her hand over her waist and smiled.
Any points used by the customers who come here on their own belong to me.
The instructors only get a share when a customer they bring buys something.
Are you running a pyramid scheme? Of course, not.
It's purely performance-based.
Kim Hana said firmly before sighing. Anyway, it's good to finally see your face.
It's great that you're focused on training, but please show your face every once in a while.
The head manager of the neutral zone had little duties.
It wasn't that they had nothing to do, but Sol Ji-hoo had already delegated those tasks to Kim Hana.
If she's saying this despite that, it didn't look like she was complaining about the work being difficult, so there must be a matter she needed the representative's approval on. Alright, tell me.
What's up?
You see, I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts of recruiting additional members. Of course, among the neutral zone's newbies. Sol Ji-hoo's eyes widened.
I thought none of the contracted or invited are from us besides Miss Eun Yuri.
That's right. But it isn't as if someone has to be our contracted or invited for us to recruit them. Sol Ji-hoo stared at Kim Hana for a while as he thought of a past experience.
Someone from a cartel, and Oh Min-young, was it?
Looking back, there were definitely people who could not form contracts with organizations after the neutral zone. Although he was too busy at that time from Sin-young pressuring him to really notice, what mattered was that a contract could be transferred if both organizations agreed.
Why do you ask? Did you find a second Eun Yuri?
Number.
Kim Hana smiled bitterly.
I apologize, but it isn't so common for irregulars to appear. Survivors like Representative and Miss Eun Yuri might not even appear in 100 neutral zone openings. Hearing this, Sol Ji-hoo asked without feeling a bit uncomfortable.
Then? To be straightforward with you, I am looking to recruit Mr. Park Worry and Mr. Yu Yolmu. Sol Ji-hoo was surprised hearing the two names. You know them?
Is that not obvious? While Representative was focused on Miss Un Yuri, I was focused on observing those two.
Kim Hana cleared her throat.
First, Mr. Park Worry is someone I would like to personally recruit.
His abilities are nothing special, but his wits are excellent.
He is nimble and has good situational judgment. I'd like to try raising him. She was saying she wanted to reinforce the intelligence team.
Sol Ji-hoo whistled.
To be noticed by the picky Kim Hana. He began to see Park Worry differently.
He was quite daring, unlike how he looked. Kim Hana must be holding him in high regard for noticing the conditions of homunculus attack and delivering the bag to Sol Ji-hoo at the end of the tutorial's second stage. As for Mr. Yu Yolmu, Valhalla's members gave him favorable evaluations. Oh, they did?
Yes.
They've been praising him as a natural warrior for having a simple personality and withstanding Master Zhang Maldong's training without complaints.
Miss Chung Cho-hong and Mr. Richard Hugo have been especially vocal in praising him. Mr. Park Worry and Mr. Yu Yolmu, huh? Would the organizations they're contracted to hand them over so easily?
There is no way to be sure, but I believe there is a good chance. You see, forces that can afford to buy stamps don't get hung up on archers and warriors. Indeed, the two men weren't anything special just based on their classes. From an organization's perspective, rather than investing time into a resource that they were already abundant in, it might be better to trade them off for stamps and a suitable amount of money and aim for the next opportunity. Sol Ji-hoo didn't think for long.
It would be great if it worked, but would be fine even if it didn't. He nodded his head in agreement. All right, let's do it. Yes, thank you. Kim Hana replied, knowing that she was the only one suitable for this job. Valhalla indeed had a small staffing problem. Oh yes, Representative. What happened with that?
That? Our final goal at the neutral zone.
Well, I'm sure Miss Un Yuri will take care of it, but I just wanted to confirm. The neutral zone is about to end, after all. Ah. Sol Ji-hoo licked his lips.
Now that I think about it.
It was about time to get started. Asterisk.
The 12th and final week of the neutral zone started. A team of 6, including Un Yuri, was in the middle of a very hard difficulty mission.
It was to secure a bridgehead occupied by sprites. The core of this mission lied in how fast they could break through the structures interspersed on the bridge while minimizing loss. This was because sprites were strong in long-ranged attacks but unusually weak in close-ranged combat. However, the 6 people did not cross the bridge. Because they had a magician. In truth, they have been doing all missions in pretty much the same way. They would wait until Un Yuri completed her spell and attacked first, then the other 5 members would take care of the remaining monsters. This also meant that Un Yuri was a far superior magician than Adelette Delphine, albeit limited to the neutral zone. In fact, the density and range of mana that Un Yuri could currently command far surpassed what Adelette Delphine could do when she was in the neutral zone with Sol Ji-hoo. Park Worry stood guard against the sprites that were starting to get noisy and glanced at Un Yuri, who was moving her mouth and hands at the same time. Twice. No, 4 times? If this scene was from a video, the speed at which Un Yuri's mouth was moving made it seem like only her lips were moving at increased speed. Quote, dot, 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 quote. She seemed to be chanting a spell the way she was murmuring quickly, but Park Worry couldn't hear a single word no matter how hard he focused. He had a feeling that this had something to do with one of her skills. After all, the speed at which Un Yuri completed spells improved drastically on the 7th week mark. At and $. As Un Yuri got closer to completing her spell, the opposite end of the bridge got louder. As sprites could use minor magic, they were reacting sensitively to the flow of mana they could feel from the other side of the bridge. They must have judged that they could not leave it be as over half of the sprites flew up. They're coming! Yu Yolmu, who was standing at the head of the group, shouted as he held up his large shield.
At the same time, Un-Yuri's spell halted.
She had finished her high-speed chanting. Un-Yuri's closed eyes slowly headed to the sky. She must have been concentrating hard as droplets of sweat rolled down her cheeks and dropped from her chin.
Soon, Un-Yuri shot her eyes open and opened her mouth wide. Freeze!
Wang! A voice imbued with virile mana burst out. She had used one of Russell's signature ultimate moves, Final Solo, which amplified the power of the user's spell by imbuing it with the user's will when they shouted a keyword.
As Un-Yuri's chant echoed out, so did her mana-imbued voice. The sprites preparing to attack from the sky trembled. However, it was far too late. The wave of cold energy spreading through the voice had already gone past them and was resounding far and wide. The sprites that were hit by the wave got covered with white frost and began to freeze, quite literally.
The team cheered as they saw the sprites fall to the ground after having their wings frozen.
This wasn't the end.
When Un-Yuri reached out with her left hand, a sharp gust of wind stormed forth, shredding the bodies of the falling sprites.
Great! The female priest who took on the role of the leader shouted.
Let's go! We can't miss this opportunity. The moment she gave out a command to charge forward, Peetst! A terrifying electric discharge suddenly surged out from the lake underneath the bridge.
The sprites that fell into the lake screamed, and the priest flinched and looked behind her.
Ha! Ha! Un-Yuri held her right hand forward as she drew heavy pants. She was glaring at the lake, looking very angry for some reason. Let's wait a bit before going. It might be dangerous. Shortly afterward, the group of 5 excluding Un-Yuri began to cross the bridge.
As most of the sprites struck by the wave froze and fell to helpless states, the group wasn't bothered by any attacks coming their way. The ones that fell into the lake had already died.
The 5 people only had to take care of the other unmoving targets.
While finishing off the sprites one by one, Park Worry tilted his head.
Strange.
The usual Un-Yuri would have saved a spell for an emergency.
But for some reason, she went all out today without holding back. It was as if she was venting her frustration at the sprites. Park Worry turned back curiously, then made a surprised face. Un-Yuri, who was slowly walking over the bridge, found a sprite and ran up to it. Although the sprite was already dead, she nudged it a couple of times before kicking it like a soccer ball with a frustrated face. Seeing the sprite's head fly into the distance, Park Worry suddenly felt pity for the poor creature.
Soon, the scene warped. They had returned to the neutral zone after completing the mission.
Great! We're finally done.
The priest clenched her fist after confirming the paper hanging on the second row of the mission board vanish.
With this, they had completed all the missions they could do. The only one that was left was the impossible difficulty mission. Although they normally wouldn't even dream about completing it, the priest stared at Un-Yuri with a hopeful gaze. It wasn't only her. The other 4 members also had looks of expectation.
Yuri Uni? As the priest struck up a chummy conversation, Un-Yuri, who was dazedly staring in the empty air, looked back.
When are you planning on doing the impossible difficulty mission? If you want, we can do it today.
Right now, in fact.
Un-Yuri spoke in a quiet voice. But, there's something we need to do before that.
The conditions, right? I remember them, don't worry.
I'm sorry, but I don't trust in verbal promises.
The priest, who replied with a smile, blinked rapidly.
Was she mistaken in thinking that Un-Yuri had an unusually sharp tone today? Un-Yuri continued, so I'd like you to sign a contract.
A contract?
The priest rolled her eyes. Uni, I thought contracts didn't exist in the neutral zone. I can just make one. No, I mean the contract's imbued with the god's oath. It's not like the contract shows effect just by having us write it.
Well, I'm a priest, so I can swear upon my god's name, but for the others.
Miss Priest. Un-Yuri cut her off. I told you I can just make one.
The priest became lost for words at her cold tone. "My name isn't Priest,"
she pouted while muttering in a crawling voice.
But not fazed in the slightest, Un-yuri took out a paper talisman from her pocket. She tore the talisman in half without a shred of hesitation, and a bright light burst out and formed a new paper. After reading the content of the paper with apathetic eyes, Un-yuri handed it to the priest.
Compulsory performance contract.
The content of the contract was simple.
Un-yuri, hereinafter referred to as A, and the 5 members who will carry out the impossible difficulty mission in the neutral zone, hereinafter referred to as B, shall form this contract to be carried out immediately after the completion of the mission. A and B shall sign this contract as evidence of their agreement. A must use a paper talisman to carry out the neutral zone's impossible difficulty mission. A must use the paper talisman within 6 seconds of the start of the neutral zone's impossible difficulty mission. However, if an unforeseen event prevents the use of the paper talisman, the time taken to resolve this issue shall not be counted toward the 6 seconds, and the time frame shall be extended automatically. When A and B complete the impossible difficulty mission, B can receive the 172,800 survival points reward, distributed according to the neutral zone's rules. However, the one-time use VIP store coupon given to B must be yielded to A, and this is to be done as soon as the mission is completed. The priest's eyebrows went up after checking the content of the contract. What was written on it was the same as what they talked about before.
But what surprised her was that the magic contract suddenly appeared out of nowhere just by ripping a piece of paper. "I have a question."
Just as she was about to ask how Un-yuri did it. "You don't have to sign it if you don't want to," Un-yuri replied sharply. The priest blinked rapidly. "And no. It's not that I don't want to."
How could she not want something that was essentially free 28,000 survival points?
"It's just that. I have no intention of changing the terms of this contract.
There are other people who would be interested, so you don't have to try to convince me."
The priest's complexion began to turn sour.
"No, wait, when did I ever say I didn't want to sign it?"
"Then sign it." "Excuse me, Uni, did I do something wrong?" The priest's voice went up slightly. They were comrades who had gone through life or death missions together. Although she understood that the contract was important, she was justifiably disappointed with Un-yuri pressuring her so much. "Ihei, let's not get too heated up." As the perfectly fine team began to show signs of internal conflict, Park Worry, who had already been reading Un-yuri's mood, cut in. "Why are you like this all of a sudden? Do you hate me, Uni?" "Hey! She just wants to be sure."
"Isn't that right, Mrs.?" Park Worry spoke eloquently.
"However, I told you not to call me that." Un-yuri's expression became even colder. "I'm an unmarried maiden. I don't understand why you keep calling me Mrs." Park Worry shrunk back at her frosty voice. "So sorry. See. She's suddenly like this." The priest shouted again, and Park Worry went, "Ah. Now, Priest Nim, calm down a bit."
"Excuse me, why are you also calling me priest? I have a name, you know?" I understand.
"Leader, you're too heated up right now. But come on. She's not like this usually. Also, my name is—" While the priest blabbered on and Park Worry worked hard to settle the situation, Yu Yolmu stared at Un-yuri, who was standing with her arms crossed. Even he thought she had gotten a bit cranky. It wasn't that there were no omens. Un-yuri became overly touchy a week or two ago, and ever since then, she had been in a downcast state.
Did something happen recently?
Once Yu Yolmu stealthily initiated a conversation, the calmly standing Un-yuri glanced back at him.
Then, after a moment of hesitation, she bit her lower lip. "I have a question."
"Yes, go ahead. What does it mean when a guy gives a girl a ring?" It depends.
It could be a normal gift, but at the very least, I'd say he sees her in a favorable way."
Then, Un Yuri drew a breath. What does it mean when a guy who has a girlfriend gives a ring to another girl?
Pardon?
Ah, just for the record, this isn't about me.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yu Yolmu furrowed his brows.
He sneaked a glance at Un Yuri's left hand, but he couldn't see it because she had her arms crossed. Un Yuri asked again, and what does it mean when a guy who has a girlfriend puts a ring on a girl's left ring finger while calling it a gift just for her? He's flirting.
Yu Yolmu spoke firmly.
Putting a ring on a girl's left ring finger is a well-known custom, both in the East and the West.
It would be difficult to find someone who doesn't know this.
That's what I thought.
Un Yuri agreed with a complicated face. Yu Yolmu became curious and asked.
So, who's this about? Un
Yuri's lovely lips became crooked. I don't know.
Un Yuri hmphed and turned away. 1. Yi Sol Ah singing an old Korean song from 1991, famous for being sung a lot in North Korean media.
One day before the end of the neutral zone, Un Yuri's team finally agreed to take on the impossible mission. Un Yuri stood in front of the plaza's notice board and reminded herself of Sol Ji-hoo's warning. Rip it as soon as you go in. There's no need to look around. If you hesitate even for a second, arrows will fly in and pierce your neck.
Sol Ji-hoo then added that he would have died on the spot if the guardian of the sanctuary didn't stop to make threats. Un Yuri put the talisman in her mouth with a nervous expression, then held the paper slip for the impossible difficulty mission in her hands. The other 5 members swallowed hard and stared at Un Yuri with their hands on each other's shoulders. The moment Un Yuri tore the paper slip in half, the members disappeared without a trace. Then, the 6 reappeared in the plaza in less than 5 minutes, all sitting on their butts. Every single one of them had their mouths agape, clearly horror-stricken. Usually, an earthquake above 5.0 on the Richter scale would be called a powerful earthquake.
An earthquake that was just 1 magnitude higher than another would release 32 times as much energy.
Hence, a 12.0 magnitude earthquake would go beyond the realm of a natural disaster and reach the realm of an apocalyptic catastrophe. As the group had just witnessed an earthquake of such scale, it wouldn't be strange if they had pissed their pants. While everyone else was at a loss for words, Un Yuri snapped out of her daze hearing an alarm.
She had received a message saying that the rights over the reward had been transferred. She looked around stealthily. Although Un Yuri was the one who had the highest amount of survival points in the neutral zone, the other 5 members of her team weren't doing so badly either. If they truly wanted, they would have no trouble buying an item from the VIP store. Money aside, the VIP store's items belonged to whoever bought them first. Once Un Yuri reminded herself of this, she shot up and ran. The other 5 tilted their heads as they watched her rush up the stairs. Maria, who was dozing off at the counter, woke up in a startle at the sound of the door bursting open. Seeing the customer who revisited after 3 months, or 89 days to be exact, she smiled brightly. Managing the VIP store wasn't a popular role. The reason was obvious just by looking at the available items. VIP store inventory. 1. Numa's Sky Boots, 50,000 SP, 1 EA. 2. Moirai's Souvenir, 600,000 SP, 1 EA. 3. Meals Branding Iron, 100,000 SP, 1 EA. 4. Seed of the World Tree, 400,000 SP, 1 EA. 5. Sainte's Measures of Sidus, 80,000 SP, 1 EA, 1. 6. Afrazos Sedge, 150,000 SP, 5 EA, 2. The cheapest item cost 50,000 survival points, an amount most survivors could not even dream of having. Although any item sold by the VIP store would net its manager a hefty chunk of survival points, there weren't many people who could buy its items. This was why Maria was so ecstatic to see Un Yuri, who had bought all of the special competences on the first day of the neutral zone. What would you like?
Maria cupped her hands together and asked half nervously and half excitedly.
Yuri checked her survival points. She had earned 120,000 points in the tutorial and another 430,000 in the neutral zone.
Because she was the top ranker, she rarely had to use her points, making her have more than 500,000 points.
On top of this, she had 6 one-time use VIP store coupons.
Yuri yelled without hesitation. "I'll take Moirai's souvenir first."
Huck. Maria's eyes split open. She couldn't believe it.
This customer chose the most expensive item from the get-go. Who would have thought she would be such a huge spender? However, Yuri wasn't done yet.
"I'll take the seed of the world tree too." Maria's jaw dropped. 1 million points.
She had earned 1 million points from Yuri's 2 sentences.
Next. Ah, 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 ah. Maria screamed like someone who was on the verge of climaxing from an orgasm. She twisted her body and moaned like she was about to die of happiness.
"Saint, stop. Stop it. Are you trying to kill me?
Stop it, I tell you." Maria shouted hysterically and begged for mercy, but Yuri did not let her off. "I want Afrazo's sedge. I'll take 4 of them. Wang." In the end, Maria could not bear the consecutive bombshells and collapsed on the floor. Convulsing sporadically, she looked up at Yuri with hazy eyes. It was as if she was seeing her Messiah. That was, until she heard what she said next. "I'll buy these 6 with the VIP store coupons. I have 6 coupons, so it works out perfectly."
"Pardon?"
Maria's face stiffened. It went without saying that instructors could only earn survival points spent by survivors. Since these items were purchased for free, she would naturally end up with 0 points. Maria madly blinked her eyes while doubting her ears.
Soon, she checked Yuri's survival points and rewards.
Fuck. Maria's face distorted.
How can it be? How can it be? The ray of hope she tasted after 3 months of despair had vanished into thin air.
Fuck.
Excuse me?
Yuri was taken aback.
But given Maria's personality, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say she was thinking, "This goddamned treacherous bitch made a fool out of me."
Fuck. Fuick.
Why are you swearing all of a sudden?
Anyway, hurry up, please. Shut it. You treacherous bitch.
You dare make a fool out of me. What?
I'm going to go tell Oppa.
What?
Fuck, call him. Call Valhalla's representative right here, right now.
Do you know who I am?
Maria shouted with her chin held high. Yuri's eyes widened. Just who could this short, blonde girl be to not get scared of a publicly acknowledged titan like Sol Jihu? You pea-sized bitch, E.H.
Oppa and I, E.H. We go way back.
We met in the neutral zone.
We went to Ramen Village together.
We went to the banquet together.
We went to war.
We went on expeditions.
We did everything, E.H.
3. The way she was talking, she seemed to be a member of Valhalla. I'm still owed a favor. You want to go for it? Want to see whose side he's going to take? E.H. Maria had completely gone nuts.
She was already spending her days depressed after a poor attempt at imitating a large-scale force and losing all the money she made by investing in stocks.
In other words, she was lashing out at Yuri to vent her pent-up frustration.
But Yuri did not know the backstory and only thought she ran into the wrong person. Jay, just give me my items. Call Representative VVVE.
Give me Numa's sky boots, Meal's branding iron, Sainte's measures of Sidus, and the remaining Afrazo's sedge too.
What? I'll pay for those with survival points.
Maria jolted. Her eyeballs were practically popping out of their sockets. A hint of bewilderment and panic crossed her face, but soon, she scrunched her face. I just don't get it. Tang. Putting down the items Yuri requested with force, she shouted. So beautiful. Tang. So glamorous. Tang.
And so capable.
Tang.
We really hit the jackpot this time.
Yep. Oppa really reeled in some talent.
After putting down all the items in an instant, Maria shouted with a look of anger. That will be 380,000 points in total.
Thank you. Yuri looked completely dumbstruck.
Just who is this? Because Yuri was staring at her so intensely, Maria let out a dry cough and raised her eyebrows. I'm so grateful, what should I do? That's it.
I'll go to Oppa and praise her. With that, she just ran off. She's crazy. Yuri was truly stupefied. She's completely insane.
This was the first meeting of the money-crazed crazy and the genius magician.
Asterisk.
D-Day 1. A day remained until the end of the neutral zone.
Sol Jihu looked at the items he got from Yuri with a beaming smile.
He originally planned to obtain Moirai's souvenir only. So how could he not be happy when he received so many items on top of the regular competences to be used for training?
She's something, alright. Sol Jihu had kept his promise, and Yuri had kept hers. More than what she promised, in fact.
Since she was so generous, it was only right that Sol Jihu returned the favor. Come to think of it, she looked a little depressed. It made sense for her to feel bitter given that she had to hand over the items she worked so hard to obtain.
Today's the last day.
Should I go talk to her? Deciding as he pleased, Sol Jihu put an item in his back pocket before leaving his room. He stopped by the cafeteria on his way to grab a couple of beer cans, then walked up the stairs. Miss Yuri?
Talk. Knocking lightly, the door shot open. Yuri walked out in a tank top and a towel on her head. She must have taken a hot bath as her hair was wet. She gave off a sweet scent, possibly from the vitality-recovering herb put in the bath. Can we talk for a bit? Today's the last day. Sol Jihu winked as he held up a can of beer. Yuri lowered her head slightly. The way she blankly stared at the ground, she seemed to be hesitating. On the other hand, she seemed to be on guard. Okay.
However, her hesitation did not last long.
Perfect timing. I wanted to ask you something.
She must have a lot of frustration pent up inside as she spoke in an argumentative tone.
Sol Jihu tilted his head, but Yuri had already turned away.
The room had a couch and a table, but Yuri sat down on the floor.
Sol Jihu sat across from her.
The man and the woman drank beer quietly as they munched on dried jerky. As an awkward silence continued, Yuri suddenly let out a sigh. Perhaps because she just got out of the bath or because alcohol entered her system or because she was simply weak at alcohol, her neck was already red. She looked like she would drink herself to sleep, so Sol Jihu quickly initiated the conversation. Didn't you say you had something to talk to me about?
Yes, but can't you go first, Oppa? She seemed to be extra careful. Right, I'd be disappointed too if the fruits of my labor were taken away. Empathizing with Yuri's predicament, Sol Jihu took out Neil's branding iron from his pocket. Here's a present. Yuri stared at the stamp. She seemed to be at a loss for what to do, just like someone who received a surprise gift. This is Neil's branding iron. Once you brand yourself with it, you'll be able to double the power of a spell once every 48 hours. I thought it'd be perfect for you.
Why, you don't have to give it to me. Don't be so humble.
You're more than qualified to take it.
Sol Jihu shook his hand. He looked like he would force it on her even if she refused. Yuri lowered her head and took the branding iron. Thank you. Sol Jihu observed Yuri intently as she studied Neil's branding iron. She didn't look all that happy. No. She looked like she liked it, but her eyes were still without energy.
Why? Looking at her with his 9 eyes, he saw that her current emotion was complicated. Do you want anything else? No, not at all. It's fine, so tell me. As long as it isn't Moirai's souvenir, I'll give it a thought. I would have already told you if I wanted something.
Yuri said in a calm voice.
What you've given me so far is more than enough. Introducing teacher's dream world to me, especially. I won't forget that for the rest of my life. Really.
From the sound of it, the VIP store items didn't seem to be the cause.
Then are you depressed because the neutral zone is ending?
Because I was like that.
I really had a lot of fun, so I was reluctant to leave on the last day. No, I'm not that attached to this place. We all have to leave anyways. Yuri shook her head. A soft swirling was heard from the beer can.
Did she think it was strange that Sol Ji-hoo was asking this and that?
She took a sip of beer and asked, "Why are you asking this?" No reason. You just looked a little down. Talk. The beer can slammed down a little harder. Yuri puckered her lips and sucked in the liquid on her lips.
After sucking a few times, she opened her mouth.
There's something I'm dying to know.
What is it? Oppa, you have a girlfriend, right? Sol Ji-hoo furrowed his brows. Just what kind of a random question was that?
He didn't understand why she was asking him this, but he answered anyway. No, I don't.
You don't?
Then. Yuri closed her mouth in the middle.
No. They don't have to be boyfriend and girlfriend. A lot of people hook up in this day and age.
Miss Yuri?
Then what about this?
She murmured something to herself before suddenly raising her left hand. The silver ring on her ring finger sparkled under the light.
Why did you give this ring to me? Should I have not? You can, but you put it on my ring finger and said it was a present just for me. Yeah, that ring is the medium that's needed to enter the dream world. That's why it's a present just for Miss Yuri.
Huh.
And when you're gifting a ring to a girl, aren't you supposed to put it on their left ring finger?
Quote!
Yuri was surprised twice. But the second surprise was a magnitude bigger than the first.
She stuttered. And no, who told you that?
My ex-girlfriend. My mom also said the same thing. Ex-girlfriend and Oppa's mother?
Yes. Yuri swept her forehead up and lifted her chin up. I'm sorry. I must be stupid because I can't understand a thing.
Can you explain again?
In more detail.
Sol Ji-hoo scratched his head. He didn't know why he had to explain it to the last detail, but seeing Yuri's confused face, he decided to tell her.
Was it when I was in my first year of middle school?
Making a ring out of coins was a popular fad at the time.
I wasn't an exception. Okay, go on.
But after I made one, I didn't know what to do with it.
The fad was pretty much over by then too.
So I asked my ex-girlfriend. No, I guess we weren't dating back then. We were childhood friends. Anyway, I asked her if she wanted it, and she was really happy. That was when I first heard it.
What? Wait, didn't Oppa's mother say the same thing? She did. She was there actually when the exchange was happening, and she smiled and said Sonhwa was absolutely right. Yuri was struck speechless. She wasn't sure what she just heard.
So you're saying this idea was embedded into your mind after hearing that? If you put it like that, it's like I was brainwashed or something. It's not that bad.
Just.
Sonhwa is always right.
No, Oppa, what someone says can't always be right.
That's true, but things Sonhwa says to me are. You know, it's like the saying, if you listen to your mom, you'll get a rice cake even while you're asleep. Sonhwa was like that for me.
If only I listened to what she said. Then things wouldn't have turned out like this.
Sol Ji-hoo said regrettably. But Yuri, who didn't know his circumstances very well, still had question marks in her eyes. But as a fellow obsessive love disorder patient, she had an idea. Did that Uni say that often? That Oppa should just listen to her, that she's always right, and that this is all for Oppa's benefit. Oh. How did you know?
Sonhwa says that all the time.
You said you were childhood friends?
Yep, our parents were friends even before we were born. She was also my neighbor. So you must have known her for a long time. Since the day we were born. We were always together since we were babies, but we didn't start dating until we got into college. Ah, I still remember. I mustered up the courage to ask her out, and she suddenly burst into tears, saying that she's been dying of frustration since elementary school and that she's finally gotten her wish. Sol Ji-hoo smiled pleasantly as he reminisced about past memories. The clever Eun Yuri began to understand the details of Sol Ji-hoo's background. To be more precise, exactly how Sol Ji-hoo ended up this way. He's been completely brainwashed. Although Sol Ji-hoo denied it, it wouldn't be brainwashing in the first place if he was aware. From the looks of it, this ex-girlfriend of his had carefully groomed him over a long period of time, and his family seemed to have helped secretly. Simply put, the ex-girlfriend had earmarked him at a young age and raised him to her taste. Just how much did she like him to go so far? Eun Yuri applauded the care and effort this Sunhwa put into grooming him while feeling a chill at the same time. This woman's tenacity was definitely not something Eun Yuri could match. Maybe she instilled this strange common sense into him to ward off other girls who would approach him. It was a plausible theory given the underwear gift incident. Moreover, Eun Yuri also became awkward around Sol Ji-hoo after he gifted her a ring. Eun Yuri quietly muttered in astonishment. But, if you groomed him so much, why not hold on to him to the bitter end? Why set him free? Ah! He said he was a gambler. She tilted the beer can back as her body slowly leaned forward. She was speaking with her body language. Whatever, it doesn't matter what happens. Are you alright? Yes, I'm fine. Unlike what she was saying, the way the end of her speech trailed off showed that she was drunk. Eun Yuri cooled herself off with the coldness of the floor and muttered weakly. I'm still not sure I understand everything, but I think I may have been misunderstanding things. Sol Ji-hoo stared at her before going, ah. He started to understand what misunderstandings Eun Yuri had. Was that why her current emotion was complicated? He grinned, thinking how absurd it was, before bursting into laughter. It would be a different story if it were Seo Yuhui, but to be completely honest, Eun Yuri was not his type. It must have been a misunderstanding. Don't worry, I'm not an easy guy. Sol Ji-hoo spoke rubbish while being blissfully ignorant. As he slowly turned his gaze, he saw Eun Yuri grumbling. For some reason, her expression was full of dissatisfaction. Because this side of her was rather refreshing, Sol Ji-hoo ended up laughing once more. Looking back, Eun Yuri had rarely revealed her emotions during the tutorial. He never knew what she was thinking about, and whenever she stared blankly into the air, he wondered if he invited a fool. But now, she was revealing a small part of her inner thoughts. Perhaps this was Eun Yuri's real self. In that case, he must have gotten closer to her compared to the tutorial. Thinking so, Sol Ji-hoo cheered up. Same time. It was deep into the night, but the Eva Royal Palace was bustling. Charlotte Arya was wandering back and forth in the Grand Hall. With her hands behind her, she was walking busily and nervously. Your Majesty, please go to sleep. Don't you need to head to the dream world? Sorg-kun offered, unable to bear looking at her. However, Charlotte Arya did not even pretend to listen. What should we do? Sol Ji-hoo, where's Sol Ji-hoo? Why isn't he back yet? How can he be gone at a time like this? The neutral zone hasn't ended yet, Your Majesty. When will it end? The completion ceremony will be tomorrow morning. They should be back immediately afterward, so please talk to them then. But even if they arrive before then, your servant will still be here. Sorg-kun bowed while calmly soothing Charlotte Arya. Please do not worry and head to sleep. 1. The name of this item has been fixed to what the author came up with, was previously mistranslated. 2. This item was mistranslated by the previous translator as Aphrodite's Sedge. The name isn't Aphrodite, but Afrizo, Isn't from anywhere as far as I can tell. 3. A parody of a famous line in the Korean movie Nameless Gangsters.